defense rests. Let's lay it down. Gonna dig deep, wave that verdict round. The defense rests. Time to analyze. With the evidence, we'll unveil the crime. Justice served in an honest fight. True crime tales till the verdict's right. Solving more than just trivial quests, where sentences rule at the defense rests.
Got up and told you that this case is about Mollie Tibbetts. And this case is about Mollie Tibbetts. You all sat through some very disturbing pictures, some very disturbing testimony. You saw her body in the decomposed state, and your heart should break for Mollie Tibbetts. Your heart should break for her family. Mollie Tibbetts deserves justice. Her family deserves justice. But so does Cristhian Bahena Rivera. The defense position is an interesting one, because a lot of times you sat through jury selection and it was made a point several times that it's the job of the state to prove my client guilty. Oftentimes, you won't hear any evidence from the defense whatsoever. Oftentimes, the defense will just rely on the inconsistencies or the failure to investigate of the state. But that's not what we will do here. We won't just rely on the failure of the state to prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt. We intend to bring you witnesses, and that's because you need to hear what they have to say. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this case is about a man that immigrated here from Mexico. You will hear about Cristhian's family circumstances and the reasons that he decided to come into this country. You'll hear about the differences in Mexico, that it's not just, $7.25 an hour versus $12 an hour that someone can make for an income capacity. That the differences between someone that is trying to find employment in Mexico and someone that is trying to find employment in the United States, it's a fraction that a person can make down there. And although we brought this case and we've talked about immigration, because we must embrace it. We must embrace that the evidence here shows you that Mr. Bahena Rivera came to this country. You can agree with it, you cannot agree with it. You can be Republican or you can be Democrat. But the evidence here that you must decide, the evidence here that you must rely on, has nothing to do with that side issue. It's the black or the white socks that we talked about in jury selection. And what we ask you to do is, when you evaluate the evidence, to set that aside. It's not part of the case. It's not part of the elements. It's just a mere fact that you must rely on. And what you must do is take all those other facts, take all those other things, whether you agree on them or you don't agree on them, and to decide whether or not you believe the evidence can be proven beyond a reasonable doubt. Now let's talk about this interrogation. You heard Ms. Romero and I quibble between an interview and an interrogation. Was it an interview? Was it an interrogation? What you will see in this case is there's no dispute on the fact that my client worked 12 hours at a dairy farm, scoop and poop, cleaning grounds, and then at the end of his day, he was brought to the Poweshiek County Sheriff's Office. Now, did he voluntarily go? Yes. Was he asked, hey, will you come down? Yes. But something that you must decide and something that you must think about from the evidence is whether this man, this defendant here, A man who is a yes man, that's what the evidence will show you. Go clean the stable, yes. Go do this, yes. Go do that, yes. And the evidence will show you that law enforcement came to this dairy farm. The evidence has shown you that they came to this dairy farm and everybody cooperated. Everybody just took a buccal swab. Everybody did what they needed to do, consistent with what they did that day. And you hear about this interrogation. And then it went on and on and on. Unfortunately, you're not going to be able to see the entire thing. It's in Spanish. Unfortunately, you're not going to be able to hear the entire thing. It's in Spanish. But what the evidence has shown you and what the evidence will show you is that there was a systematic confrontation with my client. The first thing is he was talked to. Tell me about your life. Tell me about your family. Tell me about your daughter. Tell me about all of those things that are Cristhian Bahena Rivera. And then they started to confront him with the evidence. They confronted him with this videotape. They confronted him with these pictures. And they said, we don't believe you. We don't believe that you weren't there. And the confrontation continued until it was put in my client's head, perhaps you blacked out. The state in this case, they got what they wanted, and they closed the case. They got what they needed. There was an intense amount of pressure, that's what the evidence has shown you, to close this case, to arrest someone for this vicious crime. And instead of continuing to work the case, instead of continuing to work the evidence, they just submitted it to you. Now, the first witness that you will hear from today is a Dr. Michael Spence. He is a DNA expert. He used to work at the Indiana State Crime Lab. He's done consulting work in cancer research and other DNA evidence. And what he will tell you is that in that trunk liner, Mollie Tibbetts' DNA was found. But he will also tell you that there were other contributors, that there were other sources, and that because only Cristhian Bahena Rivera's DNA was provided, and Mollie Tibbetts' DNA was provided, because no other DNA was provided, those alleles, those DNA profiles are unaccounted for. We do not know. You will also hear from different witnesses that knew my client. You will hear about his family. You will hear about his life. And you will hear about his routine. This case, you've heard Mr. Freeze talk about different suspects. You've heard Mr. Freeze talk about different evidence that was ignored or not looked into. And it is our job, it's our obligation to Mr. Bahena to bring forth to you anything that can cast doubt on the state's evidence. It's our obligation to you, to Mr. Bahena, to fairly, if we can, provide you with the evidence that does not support a conviction. Each one of you is an intricate person with very different backgrounds. Each one of you, you don't leave your common sense at the door, has a different story. Each one of you have different ways to look at the evidence. And what we ask you to do is to listen to our case fairly, to pay attention, and to remember that each one of you have the power to say no. Thank you.
Thank you.
I've got our first witness whenever you're ready.
The defense may call their first witness.
Thank you. We call Dr. Spence.
Come on. Actually, sir, can I get you to stop here and I'll swear you in, okay? Raise your hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Okay. Now, if you make your way over there, please, and be seated. Ms. Freeze, you can proceed when you're ready.
Your Honor, before I get started, I would offer Defendant's Exhibit T, that is Dr. Spence's CV.
Is that agreeable, Mr. Brown?
It is, Judge Van Hunter.
Defense Exhibit T is admitted.
Please state your name for the court.
My name is Dr. Michael J. Spence, S-P-E-N-C-E.
What is your educational background?
I have a bachelor's degree and a master's degree. Both of those are in microbiology, and both of those are from the University of Texas at El Paso. I then went on to receive a PhD in molecular biology in 1990 from New Mexico State University.
What did you do after you completed your PhD?
I went on to work in what's called postdoctoral research positions, first for 4 years in Vermont at the University of Vermont Medical School. Then I went for 8 years to Boise, Idaho, where I worked at the Boise VA Medical Center. That was all research on DNA, mostly, especially as the years passed, directed towards cancer research.
As part of your research, how many peer-reviewed scientific articles did you publish?
14.
Isn't it true that you have also completed a book chapter on forensic biology DNA?
Yes,
Is the chapter in press as we speak?
I hope so. They've been threatening to publish this for years, but I've been told that sometime early summer, it should be coming out via Thomson Reuters West. And the chapter is called Forensic Use of DNA.
So you start in cancer research, is that right?
That's correct.
And you move on to DNA, is that correct?
Yeah, the cancer research was mostly looking at expression of DNA in cancer cells, that sort of thing.
How did you go from cancer research to forensic DNA, sir?
Well, when I was finishing up in Idaho, that would be in 2003, I became interested in what was going on in crime laboratory settings with the DNA. So I started looking around at possible law enforcement positions, and I settled on the Indiana State Police, and they settled on me and hired me and put me into their Evansville Regional Lab down at the southern end of the state of Indiana.
Did they provide you with any specialized training when you transitioned to the Indiana State Police?
Yes, I was fairly knowledgeable about how to work with DNA from the research, but I had a lot to learn about how things work in a police lab with things such as chain of custody. So I needed to learn about that and how to lay out evidence and look for body fluids, and to do all the specialized steps in DNA typing, which is to extract the DNA and quantify how much DNA is on each evidence item. And then eventually do the typing of the DNA and compare evidentiary DNA to known reference samples and put all that into proper reports and testify if necessary.
So this was lab work with the state police, is that correct?
That's correct.
Now, how long were you at the Indiana State Police?
I was there for 4 years, from May of 2003 until May of 2007.
What did you do then?
I then was interested in going home, and I had a position waiting for me there where I could work as a technical manager for a startup lab that would do outsource DNA that could be for to help reduce crime lab backlogs or to do defense testing. So I came home to Las Cruces, New Mexico, which is where New Mexico State University is, and worked there for 8 months as an interim technical manager before I decided to resign and start the business that I'm in right now.
You still are in New Mexico, is that right?
Yeah, I've been in Las Cruces since 2007.
How long have you been employed with your own business then, sir?
I launched my business in February of 2008, so it's been a little over 13 years.
Do you exclusively provide consulting services?
Yes, I don't do lab work. I have no lab. So that's strictly what I do, is offer my consulting on all the complexities of what we do with this DNA technology and so forth.
I would assume that there's times where your expertise or your consulting needs follow-up work with another lab. Is that right?
Yeah, there are some instances where there's a request for that to do laboratory work, and I have to make sure that nobody sends me anything. Because if there's going to be actual materials that need to be analyzed, there's various labs, outsourced labs out there. And there's one in the Chicago area that I particularly like. But there are a lot of choices as to where you can get that kind of analysis done where you have a defense situation where they don't have the resources, they don't have the lab of their own. they can arrange to have those materials sent to an outsourced lab and have analysis done.
How many cases have you reviewed for as a case as a forensic scientist, sir?
Over 1,100.
How many open DNA cases are you working on right now?
Right now, about 60.
In your capacity, in any of the work that you have done, sir, have you ever been fired, laid off, or resigned for some cause?
No.
You have a website for your company, is that right?
Correct.
That company is called?
Spence Forensic Resources.
Is it just a one-page thing, or what does that look like, sir?
It used to be much more than that, with all kinds of links and information when I first started my business, but I've made it much simpler. It is just a one-page thing that describes what I do and provides information as to how to contact me.
Has a prosecutor ever reached out to you and asked for your services?
Well, with the Indiana State Police, the first 16 times I testified in the casework I did, yes. And recently, the Indiana State Police has contacted me about an old analysis I did in 2006, and they might be having me testify in the next couple of months. That hasn't been solidified yet, but as a consultant, no. Typically, it's going to be either defense attorneys, public defense attorneys, or sometimes civil litigants.
Why wouldn't a prosecutor ask you for your assistance on a case?
Well, there would be a possibility of that, but they've got a built-in analyst. When a crime is going to be investigated, it's going to end up in a crime lab, much like the one that I worked at with the Indiana State Police, and they've got somebody already assigned to that, and they're experts. So not only do they get to do the hands-on work, but they're trained to be able to analyze and then testify to their analysis. So there's not that much need to have somebody come in a secondary fashion and review their work.
What options do defense attorneys have for getting a second opinion on DNA evidence?
Well, there's people like me available to get that from. Otherwise, you've got to rely on your biology education from college to school yourself on what you might need to ask crime lab analysts.
So what we've asked you to do is to take a look at the DNA analysis and get kind of a second opinion. Is that right?
Correct.
And would it make sense for us to call the crime lab analyst in Iowa to have them critique their own case?
Well, when I was with the Indiana State Police, that just wouldn't work. If I got a call from a defense attorney, I'd be polite, but I'd tell them to talk to my technical leader if they wanted somebody to critique my case. But it doesn't make sense for me to look at my own casework and critique it. So yeah, they would need to get somebody outside of the crime lab that did the work to take a look at it.
So Mr. Freese and I, we called you and asked for your assistance in this case. Is that right?
That's correct.
And when every case is different, is that right, Dr. Spence?
Yes.
But generally, when a defense attorney calls you, what is it that we ask you to do?
Well, typically they're going to be interested in interpreting what's in the reports. Usually there's going to be either one short report, or in this case, there's 4 reports. They want an analyst like myself to look at all those reports, but to go beyond that and also look at all what we're called the supporting documents. And I mentioned those steps of laying out the case items and looking for body fluids and extracting DNA, quantifying DNA, and doing all the typing. An analyst like myself, we can look at all those supporting documents just to make sure that everything adds up and makes sense. And there's police reports to look at as well to tie together with the scientific work. So that's typically what I'm being asked to do, is to tie everything together and to make sure that the science makes sense.
So there's checks and balances in place. Is that right, sir?
Yes. So within a crime lab, you have peer review. For example, you have another analyst who did not handle a case who will peer review the reports and the supporting documents, but I'm doing an added layer of that. When I examine a case, I'm looking at it again as a peer reviewer of all the documents.
Now, your job, Spence Forensic Services, you don't do it just out of the goodness of your heart. Is that right?
Sometimes, but most of my cases, I'm going to charge fees.
Your company is how you support your family. Is that right?
That's correct.
Are you being paid to conduct work for Mr. Freese and I, as well as to testify?
Yes, ma'am.
How do you keep up with emerging technologies when you're not at a lab?
Well, probably the best way that I can do that is what I'm doing is looking at so many cases out of so many labs in so many states. I'm not only just looking at the reports and the supporting documents and all the police reports, but I do look at their standard operating procedures of the various labs. There are DNA technical manuals that describe precisely how they do things, so I can keep up on the evolution of that in various labs and look at that. But there's also in the age of the internet, all the scientific papers that are published relevant to forensic biology and DNA, you can usually get those for free. One example is a service called ResearchGate. They use more than anything else to find these articles and get a hold of them, sometimes directly from the authors. But there's, especially during the pandemic, with a lot of downtime from court, there's a lot of webinars that are available that you can either attend over the internet and see what's going on with a lot of talks that people are giving on forensic biology and DNA. But you can review archived webinars on that. So I do a lot of that, and I think that pretty much covers it, to have all those resources available to keep up with the emerging technology.
How many different laboratories have you reviewed DNA evidence from?
I think it's over 90 at this point.
What about how many different jurisdictions or states?
That's out of 30 different states.
As part of your work, how many times have you been qualified to testify as a DNA expert witness?
The first 16 times were with the Indiana State Police as a representative of that facility where I worked for the prosecution. I've also testified another 129 times. So this is the 146th time, either in hearing or a trial.
Through your 16 or 17 years of working as a forensic scientist, have you ever been disallowed to testify as to your expert opinion?
On forensic biology and DNA, not once.
Have you been qualified to testify in specialized forensic DNA areas?
Yes, on things such as just the crime scene handling of DNA items, potential DNA items, DNA mixture analysis. There's transfer events that can play into how a case is analyzed, and minimizing contamination within the laboratory. I've testified to all those areas. There's another technology called YSTR testing, which is male-based DNA testing, and I've testified to all those specialized sub-areas, which would fall under forensic biology and DNA.
Are there ever any times that a defense attorney has called you and asked for your assistance and you haven't been able to help them?
Yeah, well, there's been instances where I could at least help them to understand what's in the case file, and I'm always able to do that. But there are many instances where there's nothing wrong with the way the work was done. There are no problems or interpretation issues. And just as a gauge, it's less than 15% of the time that I have a case where I'm actually needed to testify.
So it's much more common for you to find no major problems. Is that right?
That's correct.
Your Honor, I'd ask this court to qualify Dr. Spence as an expert witness in DNA.
Mr. Brown?
Judge, I don't believe it's necessary to have the court do that. With very liberal rules on experts, we have no dispute that he is an expert in DNA analysis.
Your request is granted.
When were you first contacted to look at Cristhian Bahena Rivera's case?
That would be the very early beginning of October of 2019.
What did you review in looking at his case?
I reviewed, as I mentioned, there's case reports involved in this instance. There were 4 of them. Most of those were generated in 2018, shortly after the incident in question, and into the latter part of 2018. And then another report came out right around the beginning of October of 2019. So I review all those reports, and tied to those 26 items that were looked at in those reports are all the supporting documents that I mentioned, all those steps that we do in the crime lab. I looked at all the documentation from that, various police reports, photographs, that sort of thing.
Now, when DNA evidence is submitted, how do you, I guess, find a match or compare it with someone's known DNA?
Well, within these reports, there, as I mentioned, supporting documents, probably the key documents within there are something called electropherograms. I'll call them E-grams to make it easier on everybody. These E-grams are just the actual data output from each of the evidence items. I mentioned there's 26 evidence items, but you also have references from, in this case, a couple of known individuals, and you do comparisons of what's on the E-grams from those and deduce, for example, when there's mixtures of DNA, whether a person's DNA is within that mixture or not.
In this case, what known DNA samples were submitted, sir?
There were only 2 that were used for those comparative purposes, and those would be the victim, Ms. Tibbetts, and the defendant, Mr. Bahena.
There were some other samples that were submitted when Ms. Tibbetts was still missing to try to develop a DNA profile. Is that right?
That's correct.
And explain that just briefly for the jury.
Well, in some instances where we have a body that's been found, there might be difficulties in getting a good DNA profile from that person or verifying that is the right person. So you can take family members and do comparisons to family members to confirm that they're related and that you're not misidentifying anybody or you're not getting any of the genetic information wrong. And that was done in this case. And I see that often, especially with homicide cases.
When it comes to examining the results within Iowa DCI reports and checking their conclusions against all supporting documents, isn't it true that one thing that you are looking for is problems?
Yes.
And in this case, did you find any problems with the analyzing of the evidence?
No, just based on what the typical protocols are for doing all those steps of extraction and quantifying the DNA and doing the comparisons. I didn't see any major issues with handling or possible risks of contamination or protocols that were in place that weren't followed properly. I didn't see those kind of problems in this case.
So all the proper protocols were followed, no issues there, is that right?
Yeah, it was typical of most cases, how the analysis was set up and done. It was, there were no surprises there.
There were no major problems, but when you refer to interpretation, first of all, what does interpretation mean for the jury?
Well, typically that's going to be the interpretation of what's on those egrams when you do an analysis of, for example, DNA mixtures that come off of some evidence items. You want to compare those. In this case, we have just the two samples, one from the victim and one from the defendant. Sometimes there can be interpretation issues, especially with mixtures, and there can be some disagreement in exactly how you interpret what's on various items in any case. And I did see some differences in how I would characterize the mixtures.
So the difference of opinion would be the interpretation issues of the DNA evidence. Is that right?
That's correct.
And what did you see there, sir?
I saw on various items, just generally speaking, that there were mixtures that could be seen. In some cases, the mixtures were fairly strong profiles, but in some instances, they were weaker profiles. But generally, what a lot of labs within their guidelines, what they do is they get mixtures that are somewhat complex and weak signals, and they just refer to those result comparisons as inconclusive. And in some instances, I wouldn't necessarily call them inconclusive.
In this case, well, first of all, Ms. Tibbetts, we know is a victim of a crime here. You'd agree with that, is that right?
Yeah, that's clear.
And Mr. Bahena Rivera has been charged, so it makes sense that his buccal swab has been submitted. Is that right?
Correct.
So in reference to Ms. Tibbetts and Mr. Bahena Rivera, what are we looking for just with them?
Well, in any case, it's similar to this, where it's simplified. It's just looking at a defendant and just looking at a victim. You're going to typically look at things that are possessions of the defendant. For example, his vehicle is key in this case, or any kind of possessions that would be from any defendant. Things like his clothing or his personal items. You're going to not necessarily be interested in his DNA on his own items. You're looking for foreign DNA, specifically a victim of a crime. You want to look within a car for that victim or any other items from him. Conversely, if you have if you're taking samples from the actual person who's been victimized or that person's clothing, you're not necessarily very interested in their profile there. You're looking for foreign profiles. Specifically, if you see evidence of the defendant there on a victim, on her or on her clothing, you want to be able to characterize that and identify that presence.
Now, if, and I'm talking about in a hypothetical, we see unaccounted for DNA, does that 100% mean that somebody else was involved in a crime?
It could mean that, but the DNA is not going to tell you that. The DNA is going to only tell you from a specific evidence item whether or not there are those unaccounted for sources of DNA or a source of DNA. It's only going to tell you that they're there within what is a snapshot of what's on that surface. It's not going to tell you the history of how that DNA got there. There's no timestamp that tells you when it came to be there.
But it can tell us if there's an out-of-place individual somewhere near a location of a crime scene that perhaps might have been involved. Is that correct?
Yes, that could be what you're looking at when you see unaccounted for alleles on an item that is in a location like that.
Now, sir, I'm going to direct your attention to the examination of the trunk liner in this case. And I'd ask counsel, State's Exhibit 50 has already been admitted. I'd ask counsel to bring that up and to bring it up on the screen.
We'll get that here in just a second.
We've got it, Scott.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
I won't make you do my work for me.
That's okay. We can
Yet.
stuff if you want us to do this one.
All right, now, sir, with reference to the trunk liner, which was covered in item number 58 that was submitted to the lab do you have some interpretation differences?
Yes, 58 item, the area 58, I'll call it, can be broken down into various sub-items. Most key is 58.1, 58.2, 58.3, and 58.4. I'm not sure which is which on here, but those were all what were considered possible blood stains. And when a presumptive test for blood was run, those tested positive, those 4 areas.
And what did you find that you disagree as a matter of interpretation, sir?
Well, in the instance of, for example, 58.1, there were 17 unaccounted for alleles. When I just refer to what I mean by unaccounted for, we have to recall that the only 2 individuals we're comparing this to are the only 2 individuals that were typed in this case, the only 2 references, and those were Ms. Tibbetts and the defendant. Outside of their inventory of genetic markers, what we call alleles, were 17 unaccounted for alleles that had to be from somebody else or more than one other person. And there was a clear indication there was female DNA within there that, once again, we don't want to confuse that might have been Ms. Tibbetts. We're talking about a female other than Ms. Tibbetts.
So what it showed is that Ms. Tibbetts' DNA was clearly in that trunk liner. Is that correct?
Not on that particular place. We're not necessarily certain about that. In the instance of the laboratory interpretation, 58.1 was written off as inconclusive comparisons there. I disagreed with that to a degree, the interpretation, in that there needed to be an added statement, for example, that there were unaccounted for alleles in another source of DNA that was not Ms. Tibbetts.
And did it point to a gender of what that DNA contribution would be?
It appeared to be a female source.
Is there any other interpretation differences that you would have with 58, and specifically with reference to 58.1, 58.2, 58.3, 58.4?
Yeah, when you look at 58.2, there were also unaccounted for alleles in that instance. It was only 7 of them, but there was a clear overlap between what you were seeing in the unaccounted for alleles on 58.1, where there were 17. When you get to 58.3 and 58.4, there were only 4 unaccounted for alleles that couldn't have been from Ms. Tibbetts, could not have been from the defendant. And there was, when you get down to 4 alleles, it's hard to say there's overlap because it's just a few alleles. A lot of people could carry those, but there was some similarity throughout the 1, 2, 3, and 4 there in area 58.
Let's move on to item 59. That's another fabric covered liner area from the trunk of the black Malibu. Is that correct, sir?
That's correct.
And describe any interpretation issues that you have there.
When we talk about area 59, there were multiple areas that were looked at, but there were 3 particular areas where there was a presumptive positive for blood. So we're not confirming blood here, but there's a clear indication that probably what you're looking at is blood. And those were 58.3, 4, and 5. I'm sorry, I'm saying 58. See, I know I was going to get confused. 59.3, 4, and 5. On 59.3, there was a mixture, I believe that was called as a mixture of at least 3 individuals, with the stronger profile was clearly consistent with Ms. Tibbetts. And I agree with that 100%. But there was additional genetic information there. In one instance, it was 10. I'm sorry, in 59.3, it was 10 unaccounted for alleles. And so those could have been from Ms. Tibbetts, could not have been from the defendant either. And that appeared to be from an unknown male. Unknown because we only have one male to compare that genetic information to.
Right, so 59.3, there is a DNA source that is from what you believe to be an unknown male. Is that correct?
Yes, beyond the clear, what we would call a major presence of Ms. Tibbetts, there were those 10 alleles. And then also at 59.4, there were 4 additional unaccounted for alleles that showed some similarity to what was in 59.3, but not that clear. And then 59.5, that was very weak, and the laboratory called that inconclusive, and I agree, it was too inconclusive to even work with.
All right, let's move on to 60, which also is part of the fabric trunk liner. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And what were your findings in analyzing that evidence?
In that instance, once again, using the inventory of DNA from Ms. Tibbetts, the inventory of DNA from the defendant, what unaccounted for alleles were there at 60.1 added up to 14 unaccounted for alleles in that instance. It was a little too iffy to say whether that was male or female. They were very weak alleles, but there were a lot of them, 14.
So you just know that there's another contributor that is not Ms. Tibbetts, correct?
Correct.
And the contributor is also not Mr. Bahena Rivera. Is that right?
That's correct.
Were there similar results from the area of the fabric liner of the door of the trunk? That's item 61.1.
Yes, in that instance, there were, once again, just looking at the inventory of the two individuals, there were 5 unaccounted for alleles in that location.
So to summarize, you have no issues with how the procedures were followed or the steps were followed in analyzing the DNA evidence. Is that right?
Yeah, there's no issues with how that was approached. And I forgot to mention too, on 61.1, it was impossible to tell whether those unaccounted for alleles were from a male or a female.
But when it comes to the details of specific interpretations of egrams from various items, specifically 58, 59, 60, and 61, you believe that the DCI oversimplified things a bit.
Yes.
Object to misleading at this point.
Please rephrase.
When it comes to the details of specific interpretations, and specifically with reference to 58, 59, 60, and 61, what is your interpretation, sir?
I would say that it's typical of a lot of laboratories that they are going to be very oversimplified in interpreting mixtures like that. And a lot of times they're going to be just written off as uninterpretable or not suitable for comparison. And to some degree, I agree with that. But I disagree that there aren't unaccounted for alleles that could not be tied to either the defendant or Ms. Tibbetts, that there are other contributors there. And you can even, in some instances, as I pointed out, you could deduce that they were likely from a female in one instance in one area of 58. And then there was male DNA in another area that was unaccounted for. And then a few other areas where there were just a few added alleles in there. And it was difficult to say what the gender was of those people, except that they were not Ms. Tibbetts and they were not the defendant.
If a known DNA sample were provided to the lab, could that be compared to see if there were similarities with the samples?
Yes, you can always do a comparison. You could take my DNA and compare it to them. Now, in some instances where the DNA signals that are there are very weak, the comparisons are only useful for what we call exclusionary purposes. You could at least exclude that that person is that added contributor. But in some instances where we're up to 17 unaccounted for alleles or 14 unaccounted for alleles, you could potentially do an inclusion of a person if either most or all of those signals do match them. And you could do a statistical calculation that can give weight to that inclusion. But for exclusionary purposes, that's often what we're looking for when we get down to minor alleles within a mixture.
No further questions. Thank you.
Mr. Brown, you may cross-examine.
Hang on just one second, Judge. Dr. Spence, good morning.
Good morning.
I don't think we've ever met before other than just prior to the courtroom. Would that be true?
I think so.
Okay, that's all right. Just to make sure I have this understood with regard to what you do, you don't have a laboratory of your own, is that correct?
I do not.
If you wanted to have any item tested in this case, you would have to submit it to an outside lab like the one you named in Chicago that you utilize, is that correct?
Yeah, to better characterize that, I would recommend that lab or recommend various other labs that are located in other places. And that those items would have to be secured from whoever has them in their possession and sent directly to those outsources.
All right, very good. And you don't do your own testing?
No, I do not.
And the only the only background that you have with any state crime lab, like what Ms. Scott, who she works for, was in Indiana for about 4 years?
Yeah,
Is that true?
It was 4 years with Indiana State Police.
Okay. So you are aware from reviewing all of the laboratory material that samples were retained for further testing if needed. Is that true?
That's correct.
And that is sticking with DCI laboratory protocols. Would that be true?
But yeah, that's similar to the protocols we had with the Indiana State Police, is to avoid consumption of items.
All right. So, and that's so it can be retested, correct?
Yes.
Either to confirm or disconfirm what the criminalist would have done at the state laboratory here in Iowa. Is that right?
That's the idea, yes.
Okay. Did you request that any of the items that you reviewed in the report be resubmitted to an outside laboratory for any type of testing?
No, I typically don't recommend doing outsourced testing or recommend against it. If that issue comes up, that's where I point out that there are labs that I favor over other labs as being a better laboratory resource for that.
I understand, but you were mentioning with Ms. Fries earlier in your testimony, these other items that you were interpreting beyond what Ms. Scott interpreted, correct?
Yeah, when we talk about, there are items that were interpreted by the Iowa DCI, but the interpretations were just a little bit oversimplified and as being inconclusive results.
And would you expect that if you resubmitted those items to an outside laboratory, the same results would have occurred?
Well, I think that there would be if you're talking about comparison just to the two individuals, I think you would at least expect the same results, but you can never be sure. What the key is that are there other individuals there? Well, there are. We'd have to take reference samples and make comparisons to those.
You have any issue at all with the state crime lab that they followed their own protocols in this case and interpreting what was found in the trunk of the black Malibu?
No, I have no issues with the way that they did their protocols. And as for their interpretations, I've been pretty clear about how I might interpret things a little bit different than the way they did.
It's kind of a tough word sometimes, right?
Sorry about that.
That's all right. So it's your opinion that you would interpret things just a bit differently than Ms. Scott. That's where we're at.
In that there's unaccounted for alleles there, and that's clear that there are.
And would it be fair to say that Ms. Scott's interpretations are fairly conservative when it comes to identifying any person's DNA in the trunk?
Yeah, I think, and that's typical of a lot of laboratories, that they're going to be a little bit non-committal when there are weak added profiles that are present within there.
And certainly your interpretation would be subject to disagreement. Is that correct?
That is always the case.
Okay. We were to ask another criminalist that has DNA expertise, they might disagree with what you're saying here today.
They would be free to do so if they felt that that was correct.
That your interpretations are a little bit more liberal than the interpretations of the DCI crime lab. Would that be true?
I would say that comparing them side by side, it's more liberal to say that they were unaccounted for alleles, but there clearly were. So I find it hard to believe that they disagree with at least that conclusion, that there's added sources there that they didn't go into in making comparisons because there were only the two references to work with.
I'm assuming that you are aware of a blood stain that was found on the trunk seal of the black Chevy Malibu. Are you aware of that?
Yes, I am.
And you're aware that that particular blood stain was compared to the known DNA of Mollie Tibbetts?
Yes, that's correct.
And the testimony has been that that DNA that was developed from that blood stain was a match to the known DNA of Mollie Tibbetts. Do you disagree with that?
Oh, I do not disagree with that. I agree fully with that.
And on that blood stain, on that trunk liner that is Mollie Tibbetts' blood, there was no mixture, correct?
No, there was a single source in that instance, yes.
Right. And Ms. Scott testified to the exact same phrasing, a single source of DNA that you just used. Were you aware of that?
I wasn't aware of what she testified to, but it was in her report.
Okay. So what is a single source DNA profile? Explain that to the jury, please.
Well, just for example, if I were to have a little accident and stab my finger and leave a drop of blood there, especially if this was with the pandemic, a completely cleaned off area right here, and they just took a little bit of that blood, I'd be shocked if it wasn't an absolute single source of just me. So when you have that kind of instance of a very rich source of DNA like blood, that's what you would expect. And if you have no unaccounted for alleles in that sample of the little drop I left there, you would call that a single source.
All right. And that single source DNA profile that is Mollie Tibbetts' blood would give us strong evidence. Would you agree that Mollie Tibbetts was on or in the trunk of the black Malibu?
Well, I think that to be more simple about it, that was a presumptive test for blood. There's every reason to believe it was blood. It gave a strong profile like blood would. It was a single source. How it got there, the DNA can't tell you that, only that it's there and it's clearly her DNA. There's no doubt that it's might be somebody else. It's not.
I understand. And we have to look at all the evidence in the case to make that determination. Would you agree?
I would agree.
I mean, you're just one part of that, like Ms. Scott is one part of the case. Would that be true?
Precisely.
But the blood certainly associates an injured Mollie Tibbetts with the black Malibu. Would that be true?
I think that that's a reasonable assumption, yes.
All right. And the mixture that's inside the trunk also has the known DNA of Mollie Tibbetts. Is that correct?
In the one case that was 59.3, yes, I fully agree that what we call a major profile in that mixture was consistent with Mollie Tibbetts, and the statistics on that it was a big number, and I have no disagreement with that.
And that certainly that blood would associate Mollie Tibbetts with the trunk of the black Malibu. Is that correct?
Yes, presuming that that's blood, and I think that that's a reasonable presumption. There's no doubt that that was from her and could have been from an injury sustained to the woman.
And it would associate Mollie Tibbetts' presence inside the trunk of the black Chevy Malibu. Is that correct?
I think that there's potential for that, yes.
And again, the fact that Mollie's blood is inside the trunk would indicate to you or any other expert looking at this that she was injured while she was in the trunk. Would that be true?
I think that would be very plausible, very reasonable, logical assumption.
Concerning your interpretation of the presence of other DNA, you have no idea how that other DNA may have been transferred into the trunk. Is that true?
That's correct. The DNA is amazing technology, remarkable technology, and very sensitive, but it's never going to give you an answer to the question of the history of how something came to be there or the timing of it.
Right. You might look at other factors and other evidence in a case to draw that conclusion, correct?
Yes, this is where a lot of other factors can be considered to try and determine who that is.
Okay. And you might look at statements that the driver of the black Malibu made in helping to make that kind of determination. Would that be true?
I think that would be pertinent information to consider, yes.
Okay. And you might look at what other witnesses may have said in the case or testified to concerning how or when a person might have been associated with the vehicle. Would that be true?
Yeah, I think that in all cases, whether they're sexual related cases or homicides or robberies, you do want to consider what witnesses say.
All right. Now, the other profile that you're testifying to with regard to interpretation, one of those was female, correct?
That's correct.
That could be Mollie Tibbetts' DNA. Would that be true?
In the instance of the areas on 58, area 58, no, they were unaccounted for alleles that were not consistent with Ms. Tibbetts or the defendant.
Okay, so you can exclude Mollie Tibbetts based upon your interpretation?
There's really no cause to believe that her DNA is in that particular area, 58.1.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Would that mean another female had been in the trunk?
Oh, there's no way of knowing if that means somebody was in the trunk. It just means the DNA is on that surface that was tested. And I have to remind everyone that what we're looking at is a snapshot of what came off on a swabbing or a cutting from material.
So it could have been transferred in there by another item that had been placed in the trunk at some point in time.
Yeah, it could be direct contact from a person. It could be a transfer event. It could be someone in the trunk. There's no way of knowing how that came to be there. The DNA doesn't answer that question for us.
And the same would be true with regard to what you've identified and interpreted as another male DNA in the trunk. Would that be true?
That's correct. It's the same answers for those.
And again, drawing your conclusions about this case beyond DNA, you have to look at all the evidence in the case. Would that be a fair thing to
I
do?
think, yes, for all the cases I've worked on, you want to look at everything.
So all of it collectively, all the witnesses, all the information, and drawing any conclusion as to what any type of DNA profile was in the trunk, what that might mean. Would that be true? Look at everything.
That's correct. I'm here for the science, but absolutely there's a lot of other factors that you want to look at in any case.
Sorry, just a second. So would it be fair to say that your role here is to solely look at the DNA analysis that was done in this case and offer your opinion with regard to that?
Yes, I would say the forensic biology and DNA, how the analysis was done, and whether protocols were followed and that sort of thing. Yes.
Dr. Spence, let me ask you this. If there was an item in the trunk that blood transferred to that could be removed, could that exclude or include anything in the trunk that may have been touched by that item? Do you understand what I'm asking?
Not really.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'll try again. So if there was an item in the trunk that blood transferred to that could be removed, the defendant could remove that, correct?
Yes, if you're talking about, let's just say, a rag in the trunk, if there was blood on that rag, that's something that we all know intuitively that the rag could be removed.
And if there are items in the trunk that were removed, those wouldn't be there for criminalists or investigators to see later. Is that correct?
Yeah, and that's just a logical question. If it's not there, then you can't analyze it.
And lastly, Dr. Spence, would you agree that heat and elements degrade DNA?
The DNA is very resistant to heat. It can be, but it's best not for it to be exposed to heat. Moisture can be bad. Sunlight can be bad for DNA, and just a lot of things can erode, rub off, or dilute DNA.
Right, and you're aware of the fact that Mollie Tibbetts was found in a cornfield in rural Powesheik County on August 21st of 2018. Are you aware of that?
Yes, I am.
And it would appear that her body had been there for several weeks. Would that be true?
That's correct.
All right. And that type of decomposition that would have occurred in this case would certainly degrade DNA. Is that right?
It's going to have a tendency to degrade DNA, to be out in the environment exposed to, in that fashion. To remove all the DNA, not likely, but it's not going to be very helpful for recovery of DNA.
Have you ever been in a cornfield in the middle of July after a rainstorm?
Probably have been. That's an Indiana thing there. I lived right next to one. So
It can be fairly humid, correct?
oh yeah,
And wet.
yes,
And all of those things affect the ability to get any type of identifiable DNA from a body. Is that correct?
that's correct.
Dr. Spence, thank you very much. I don't have any further questions.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Ms. Freeze, do you have redirect?
Just briefly, sir, let's talk first about the single source DNA profile from Mollie Tibbetts' blood on the bumper of the vehicle. You recall talking about that, is that right?
Yes,
And so for that, only Mollie Tibbetts' blood was found there, is that correct?
that's correct.
And so there weren't any other sources to compare to or anything like that, is that correct?
That's correct. It was, with it being a single source, there aren't any unaccounted for alleles.
Now, focusing then to items 59 and 60, those are both inside of the trunk, is that correct?
That's correct. That's my understanding as to how those were located.
And I want to focus to 59.3. That's a cutting that was taken from the fabric liner. Is that right?
That's correct.
And your findings were that one of the profiles was Mollie Tibbetts. Is that correct?
Yes,
But you also found that there were two other DNA profiles that were included. Is that right?
there did appear to be more than one other source, and there were 10 unaccounted for alleles.
The strongest source, were you able to give any sort of opinion as to whether those came from a male or a female?
Those did appear to be from a male, with Ms. Tibbetts not being a male. Then when you see a hint on the electropherogram of a Y chromosome, that's a clear indication that there's at least a male contributor in there.
Now, we had Mr. Bahena Rivera's sample to compare. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Did you suggest to Mr. Freese or I that we seek the help of an outside lab?
I can't recall if I did or not. When you're up to 60 cases that are unresolved, it's difficult to recall things like that.
Would a lab be of any assistance if we had no other samples to run against, specifically item 59.3?
No, you'd have to work only with the known profiles that we have from Ms. Tibbetts and the defendant. We already had that. So no, it wouldn't be useful unless we had another reference sample or more than one other reference sample to do comparisons.
So if we had a buccal sample from another known suspect, you could submit that and see if there is a match. Is that correct?
Yes, with so little genetic information there, I wouldn't use the word match, but you can show if there's consistencies there. Or as I said, for exclusionary purposes, 10 alleles would work very well.
So with reference to 59.3, if we had a known buccal sample, you could submit that and at least exclude possibly. Is that correct?
Yes, you could show some consistencies, or you could exclude depending on how the results line up.
What about item 60.1? That's another item that there was a mixture of DNA found. Is that right?
Yes, and in that instance, there were 14 unaccounted for alleles.
And if we had another known buccal swab of a potential suspect, would that be of use in comparison?
Yeah, if you had a known reference from anybody, you could do that same comparison and show some level of inclusion or exclude that person.
No further questions.
Mr. Brown, any recross?
Just a few questions, Judge. You would agree that the Iowa Division of Criminal Investigation did not break their interpretation guidelines. Would that be true?
I don't believe so, no.
And is it safe to say, Dr. Spence, that you would expect another person's DNA in the trunk of a well-used car?
It'd be hard to say for certain. It wouldn't be a surprise to find other sources of DNA in various surfaces of a vehicle.
And are you aware as to the protocols that the DCI crime lab follows in making their comparisons in DNA analysis?
I wouldn't say I'm fluent in that, but that I've looked at so many guidelines from so many different laboratories. I saw nothing unusual about how their guidelines were set up. So there was no real surprise in some instances calling mixtures uninterpretable.
And so it's no surprise to you, and certainly within the realm of the expertise of the DNA analysts at the crime lab, that they will not compare a sample if it is too weak or too complex.
Sometimes they will, and surprise me that they do, and sometimes they won't. And it surprises me that they didn't do a comparison. In this instance, they only had the 2 references. So with unaccounted for alleles, they wrote those off as uninterpretable. And that's not so unusual to see that.
And DNA, blood, items where you can develop a profile, you cannot place a time as to when that particular DNA was placed in that particular location. Would that be true?
That's correct. DNA doesn't come with a timestamp.
And again, you have to look at other evidence in the case to make those determinations. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, to at least get an idea, a hint as to what the timing might be.
You have no dispute that Mollie Tibbetts' blood and DNA was on the trunk seal of the black Chevy Malibu that's at issue in this case.
No, I don't dispute that at all.
And you also don't dispute that Mollie Tibbetts' blood and DNA was inside the trunk of the black Chevy Malibu that's one of the subjects of this case. Would that be true?
Yes, we're talking about item 59.3, and that is an interior area, and it's a mixture. That partial profile, it's a near complete profile, was consistent with Ms. Tibbetts, and the statistics on that, I have no dispute with how those were calculated.
So Mollie Tibbetts' blood is inside the trunk.
Apparently, yes.
All right, that's all. Thank you.
Ms. Freeze, are we done with this witness?
Yes.
Sir, thank you for being here. You're excused.
Thank you.
Members of the jury, at this time, we'll take a 10-minute recess. I want to remind you of your admonition. Leave your notebooks where they are, and you may exit at this time. Thank you. Go ahead, Ms. Freeze.
Please state your full name.
Alejandra Cervantes Valle.
Alejandra Cervantes Valle.
Where do you live?
Vivo en Toledo, Iowa,
I live in Toledo, Iowa,
Who do you live there with?
con mi esposo y mis hijos.
with my husband and my children.
Your husband's name is what?
Delfino Valle.
Delfino Valle.
Are you related by marriage to Cristhian Bahena Rivera?
Con Cristhian Bahena Rivera.
Sí.
Yes.
How are you related to Cristhian Bahena Rivera?
Cristhian Bahena Rivera.
Porque él es sobrino de mi esposo.
Because he's my husband's nephew.
So Delfino's nephew, is that right?
Es el sobrino de Delfino, ¿correcto?
Sí.
Yes.
Now,
Yes.
ma'am, you do speak a little bit of English, is that right?
Correcto?
Sí.
Yes.
You've been a spokesperson for the family with this.
Yes.
If a meeting is needed, I normally contact you.
Sí.
Yes.
And so you do speak some English, is that right?
Yeah, I changed your layout. Come at me, bro.
Your primary language.
Español.
Spanish.
Were you born in the United States?
No.
Where were you born?
En México.
In Mexico.
Everybody.
How is it that you ended up in Tama, Iowa?
Mi papá nos aplicó para una visa a la cual calificamos y nos vinimos toda la familia para acá.
Well, my father applied for a visa for us and we qualified. So we all came here.
So your entire family came to the United States together,
Sí.
Yes.
and that was under lawful means?
Sí.
Yes.
When did you come to the United States?
En el 2013.
Interpreted was clarified.
Under Biden, no doubt.
2003.
How old were you?
17 años.
17 years old.
Where did you come?
Marshalltown, Iowa.
Marshalltown, Iowa.
And since then, has the Marshalltown, Tama area been your home?
Sí.
Yes.
How did you meet Delfino?
Trabajábamos los dos juntos
We both worked together.
Where did you work together?
en una compañía
Hannah.
que se llamaba JBS.
Well, at a company that was named JBS.
What did you do for JBS?
Labor,
Laborer.
What type of a company is JBS?
una procesadora de carne.
It is a meat packing processing plant.
So you and your husband both worked there, is that right?
Yes.
Do you work outside of the home?
En estos momentos,
At this moment?
Right.
sí.
Yes.
Where do you work?
Trabajo en un lugar que se llama Pilgrim Heights.
I work at a place that is called Pilgrim Heights.
What do you do for Pilgrim Heights?
Limpieza.
Cleaning.
Your husband, is he employed?
Sí,
Yes.
And where is he employed at, ma'am?
en JBS.
At JBS.
When approximately did you first meet Cristhian Bahena Rivera?
7 años.
4, 5, 6, 7 years.
And is that the time that Cristhian Bahena Rivera came to the central Iowa area?
Yes.
How did you find out that he was coming?
No recuerdo bien cómo fue.
Well, I don't remember well how it went.
Lo único que supe fue que él ya estaba aquí.
The only thing I knew is that he was already here.
Did Cristhian Bahena Rivera come by lawful means?
No.
How does someone get from Mexico to Iowa?
Eso es lo que yo sé.
Well, this is what I know.
Yo no tengo esa experiencia,
I don't have that type of experience.
pero sé que caminan y cruzan la frontera.
But what I know is that they walk and they cross the border.
¿Cómo? No lo sé, yo no lo viví.
How? I really don't know. I did not live through that.
What is is it a coyote?
Sí,
Yes.
What is that, ma'am?
una persona que tiene contactos, me imagino,
Well, it's a person that I imagine has contacts
y puede cruzar a las personas.
and can bring people across the border.
Now, when Cristhian Bahena Rivera came across the border, did he utilize a coyote?
No estoy segura.
I'm not sure.
Did the family have to produce money to get Cristhian Bahena Rivera?
Sí,
Yes.
And tell me what you remember from that.
lo único que recuerdo fue que dijeron que él estaba aquí, que necesitaba dinero. No recuerdo cuál fue la cantidad, pero que necesitaba dinero para que el coyote lo dejara estar aquí en los Estados Unidos.
Well, all I remember is that they said, that they needed money. I really don't remember how much, but they needed money for the coyote to let him stay here in the United States.
And did the family work together to get that money?
Sí.
Oh, yeah.
Now, Christian's parents are back in Mexico, is that right?
Sí, ellos siempre han estado ahí.
Yes, they've always been there.
His father's name is what?
Eduardo.
Eduardo?
And Eduardo has brothers in Iowa, including Delfino, is that right?
Sí.
Yes.
I'd ask the court attendant to bring up Defendant's Exhibit QQQ. And there's a screen in front of you, ma'am. Go ahead and take a look at it.
Yes.
This is a picture that includes my client, is that right?
Sí.
Yes.
Your husband is also in that picture, is that right?
Sí.
Yes.
And are his other brothers, Christian's uncles, also in that picture?
Sí.
Yes.
Where is the picture at?
Fue en la boda de mi cuñado.
It was at my sister-in-law's wedding.
I'd offer Defendant's Exhibit QQQ.
Mr. Brown,
Judge, can I voir dire the witness on the date?
you may.
Ms. Cervantes, good morning.
Buenos días.
Good morning.
Concerning the photo that you have on the screen, can you tell us when that photo would have been taken?
Fue en el 2016.
It was in 2016.
And it was at a wedding?
Sí.
Yes.
Judge, our objection would be to relevance based upon the timing of the photo. It's also improper character evidence. So that's the basis of our objection.
Ms. Freeze, given the answer of the witness that this photo is from 2016, I'm going to sustain the objection on that basis. So QQQ will not be admitted into evidence.
Ma'am, are you close with Cristhian Bahena Rivera?
Sí,
Yes.
Before this happened, how often would you see him?
cada semana.
Every week.
What about the family? Your husband's other brothers, are you close with them?
Sí,
Yes.
Do you all regularly spend time with each other?
sí,
Yes.
Do you have birthday parties?
sí,
Yes.
Family celebrations?
sí.
Yes.
When you have those parties, is it normally only Hispanic people that attend?
Sí.
Yes.
Is that because you have any bias or anything towards white people?
No,
No.
Why do you think it is that you spend time mostly with Hispanics?
porque las personas que nos reunimos somos solamente la familia.
Well, because the people that gather together is only the family.
Now, Cristhian Bahena Rivera, you had never met him prior to him coming to the United States. Is that right?
No, I have not.
But once he came, you embraced him as part of the family. Is that correct?
Sí,
Yes.
Why?
porque era el sobrino de mi esposo.
Well, because he was my husband's nephew.
Did anyone in your family take Cristhian in to live with them?
Sí,
Yes.
Who?
Luis Medina.
Luis Medina.
And how is Luis related to the family?
Él es esposo de mi cuñada.
He is my sister-in-law's husband.
Since Cristhian Bahena Rivera has been in this country, has he been employed?
Sí,
Yes.
Where has he worked?
sabía yo que trabajaba en una, nosotros decimos la lechería.
Well, I knew that he worked at we call it the dairy.
So he worked at the dairy for a while, is that right?
Sí,
Yes.
And was that in Brooklyn or was that a previous job?
de cuando yo supe fue en Brooklyn.
Well, what I knew about was from Brooklyn.
How often would Cristhian Bahena Rivera work?
Toda la semana.
All week.
Would his work take him every day?
Sí,
Yes.
Describe Cristhian Bahena Rivera's, how he is when he's with family.
Before she answers that, Judge, I'm going to object as improper character evidence on the specific instances of conduct.
Overruled. Witness may answer.
Alejandra, I'm going to re-ask the question. Describe Cristhian Bahena Rivera's demeanor or how he is around family.
con la familia es muy, muy chistoso. Todo el tiempo hace juegos.
Well, with the family, he's very funny. He always is playing with the family. Uh-huh.
If he is with people that he does not know, have you seen him?
Sí,
Yes.
Describe his behavior then.
tímido, es muy tímido, callado.
He's very shy. He's shy. He's quiet.
So once people get to know him, he's more outgoing. Is that right?
Sí, ya cuando ya tiene confianza con las personas.
Yes. When he when he feels comfortable with the people, yes.
You understand that Cristhian Bahena Rivera has been charged with the murder of Mollie Tibbetts. Is that right?
Sí,
Yes.
Now, when this woman went missing, did you see information about it on the news?
sí,
Yes.
It was a compelling story.
sí.
Yes.
How did you become aware that Cristhian Bahena Rivera had been sought by law enforcement?
Supe una vez que lo pararon para hacerle preguntas, supuestamente él había dicho que de rutina.
Well, I found out once that he had been stopped to be asked questions, routine questions.
Y la segunda vez
And the second time,
fue cuando ya nos habló mi cuñada que estaba en la, en la estación de policía de Montezuma.
And it was when my sister-in-law called us and let us know that he was at the Montezuma Police Department.
So you find out that he's being brought in for questioning, is that right?
Yes.
As time goes on, do you become concerned for his welfare?
Sí,
Yes.
Did you go to the police department?
sí,
Yes.
The police department, you said, is in Montezuma, is that right?
sí.
Yes.
What time did you arrive?
Yo llegué como a las 8:30.
I arrived there at like 8:30.
When you arrived there, was there anyone else in your family that was there?
Sí, mi cuñado,
Yes. My brother-in-law,
What is his name?
Luis Medina.
Luis Medina.
When you arrived there, were you even admitted inside of the building?
No, hay un pequeño, ¿qué se puede decir? Como un pequeño porch donde tú entras.
No. When you get there, there's a small, I guess you could call it like a small porch that you go into when you get there.
And if you go further inside a locked door, there's a waiting room with chairs, is that right?
Yes.
So similar to any waiting room in a doctor's office or a sheriff's office or a jail that you would wait for someone to come and get you, is that right?
Sí,
Yes.
Were you allowed admission into that waiting room where there were chairs?
No.
So you stayed in the kind of porch area is what you're saying.
sí.
Yes.
How long approximately were you at the sheriff's office?
Yo llegué desde las 8:30 hasta la 1:30 de la mañana.
I arrived there, I was there from 8:30 until 1:30 in the morning.
When you were there officers and did it appear there were things going on?
Sí,
Yes.
Did you attempt through any means to try to talk with an officer?
cuando pasaban entre el lobby, sí,
When they went by and I saw them, yes.
Did they help you?
No.
Were they able, did you ask them any questions or anything like that?
no,
No.
Now, ma'am, well, let me back up. You have Cristhian Bahena Rivera's phone number, is that right?
sí,
Yes.
Would it be unusual for him to call you?
No.
Would it be unusual for him to text you?
No.
He's a young man, correct?
sí,
Yes.
Would he rely on you if he needed errands done or some help with things?
¿Qué son mandamientos?
Like, what are errands?
Would he rely on you if he needed help with something?
Oh, sí,
Oh, yes.
For example, previously, I think he's asked you to buy flowers for him for a date. Is that right?
sí,
Yes.
And were you able to organize that for him?
sí.
Yes.
Do you remember approximately when that was that Cristhian Bahena Rivera had that date?
No, se me fue la fecha ahorita.
No, the date just escaped me right now.
Okay, sometime that summer of 2018.
Sí,
Yes.
In any event, you and my client had fairly frequent phone contact. Is that right?
sí,
Yes.
Did you try to contact Cristhian Bahena Rivera that night that he was taken into custody?
sí.
Yes.
How so?
Le marcábamos.
We called his number.
Were you able to reach him?
No.
How many times approximately did you try to reach Cristhian Bahena Rivera by phone or text?
Le llamamos varias veces.
We-
No recuerdo el número exacto.
We called him several times. I don't remember the exact number.
At some point in time, did a woman come out and speak to you while you were at the sheriff's office?
Sí,
Yes.
Describe what the woman looked like and what she was wearing.
se veía joven,
She looked young,
como yo.
like me.
Traía una ropa azul. Recuerdo que traía una ropa azul fuerte.
She was wearing blue. I remember that she was wearing a strong blue.
I'd ask the court attendant to bring up defendant's exhibit II. Ma'am, what picture is shown in defendant's exhibit II?
Oh, veo a Christian en una esquina y veo a la señora que habló con nosotros.
I see Christian in a corner, and I see the woman who spoke with us.
Now I'd ask counsel to bring up exhibit JJ. What's shown in those pictures, ma'am?
Veo a Christian de nuevo en la esquina y veo como que ella ya se va.
I see Christian again in the corner, and I can see that she's leaving.
Your Honor, I would offer defendant's exhibits II and JJ at this time.
Mr. Brown,
No objection.
defendant's exhibits II and JJ are admitted.
Permission to publish. The woman that's in the blue in defendant's exhibit JJ is the woman that came and talked to you. Is that right?
Sí.
Approximately what time did she come and talk with you?
Como alrededor de las 10:30.
Like around 10:30.
When she came to talk to you, what did she say?
Yo le pregunté que si necesitábamos un abogado para Christian.
I asked her if we needed an attorney for Christian.
Teníamos ya varias horas esperándolo.
We had been waiting for him for several hours.
Ella dijo,
Hang on. Can we proceed?
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Brown.
Objection is based on relevance. And that this has previously been addressed by the court.
Sustained on both grounds.
Ma'am, after you talked with this woman, what did you do?
ella dijo que no necesitábamos abogado,
She said that we didn't need an attorney.
que como en 10 o 15 minutos Christian iba a salir.
That in
Hang on a second. We've already addressed this at the bench. I would ask that the court take some steps to admonish the witness with regard to her answer that would be consistent with your ruling.
So at this time, we'll do two things. The previous answer is stricken from the record. The witness is hereby admonished that, well, the witness should not be speaking about this subject, and we'll ask to have the next question posed. And I think the attorney understands that, given my ruling, we should not be in this area. So go ahead.
All right, ma'am. It was a bad question that I asked, okay?
Okay.
Not your fault.
Okay.
I don't want you to tell the jury anything that Officer Romero told you,
Okay.
but do tell them how long you talked to Officer Romero.
Muy poquito, menos de 5 minutos.
Very little, less than 5 minutes.
Did you ask when your nephew would be released?
Sí.
Yes.
And did you also ask to see your nephew?
No, no le pedí eso.
No, we did not ask her that.
After that conversation was done, were you offered any opportunity to see your nephew?
No.
No.
Did you continue to wait?
Sí.
Yes.
And you continue to wait in this little porch area?
Sí.
Yes.
At some point in time, did you and your family decide to leave?
Sí.
Yes.
And why?
Ya había pasado varias horas. Ya era alrededor de la 1:30. En ese momento pensamos que ya no nos iban a dar nada de información y decidimos irnos.
At that time, several hours had already gone by. It was close to 1:30 in the morning. And at that time, we decided that they weren't going to give us any information. And so we decided to leave.
Were you ever able to reach Cristhian Bahena Rivera?
No.
No.
At some point later, did you find out he had been arrested for murder?
No.
No.
Now, ma'am, I'm going to switch gears a little bit.
Okay.
Are you aware of Cristhian Bahena Rivera's family in Mexico?
Yes.
Who did he live with in Mexico?
Con sus padres y sus hermanas.
With his parents and his sisters.
Was he the oldest child of the family?
Sí.
Yes.
In Hispanic culture, is it customary for the oldest sibling to take care of the family?
Por lo regular, sí.
Normally, yes.
Would you talk with family in Mexico?
Sí.
Yes.
And were you encouraged to take good care of Cristhian Bahena Rivera?
Sí, a mi esposo en especial.
Yes, especially my husband.
Why so?
¿Por qué?
Porque para todos los tíos que él tiene aquí, él era el más chiquito.
Because for all of the uncles that he has here, he's the youngest one.
So they wanted you to take him under your wing, is that right?
Sí.
Was
Yes.
it your understanding that he was taking care of family in Mexico?
Sí.
Yes.
How so?
Él era el que mandaba dinero para que ellos pudieran comer y él fue el que mandó dinero para que construyeran su casa.
He was the one who was sending money so that they could eat, and he was the one who was sending money so that they could build their house.
No further questions.
Mr. Brown, you may cross-examine.
Ms. Cervantes, how old was Cristhian Bahena Rivera as of July 18th of 2018, if you know?
Si usted sabe, ¿cuántos años tenía Cristhian Bahena Rivera el 18 de julio de 2018?
No estoy segura, pero creo que como 20.
I'm not sure, but I think like 20.
So he was an adult. I'm sorry.
Sí.
Yes.
You were at the sheriff's office on August 20th of 2018 from 8:30 to about 11:30 p.m. Is that correct?
Hasta la 1:30 de la mañana.
Until 1:30 in the morning.
I'm sorry, I misspoke. 8:30 p.m. until 1:30 a.m. the next morning. Is that correct?
Sí.
Yes.
And
Yes.
were you always there with the other person that you had mentioned before?
Sí.
Yes.
Did you ever leave the sheriff's office at any time in that same time frame?
No.
Between 8:30 p.m. and about 11:30 p.m., did you make or attempt any phone calls or text messages to Cristhian Rivera?
De llamarlo.
Calling him.
And did he ever answer the phone?
No.
No.
Did he ever respond to the text messages?
No.
Did you meet Pamela Romero while you were at the sheriff's office on August 20th, 2018?
Sí.
Yes.
She came out into the area where you were waiting.
Sí.
Yes.
You had a conversation with her.
Sí.
Yes.
She was pleasant to talk to.
Sí.
Yes.
And do you know how long your conversation took with Ms. Romero?
Yo creo que menos de 5 minutos.
I believe less than 5 minutes.
And was that the only contact that you had with her on that evening while you were at the sheriff's office?
Sí.
Yes.
Prior to July 18th of 2018, how often in any given week would you be in the presence of Cristhian Bahena Rivera?
Una vez por semana nada más.
Only once a week.
Was that on average?
Sí, sí.
Yes.
And would that typically happen at your place of residence or some other place?
Siempre él venía a la casa de Luis.
He will always come to Luis' house.
Luis, who?
Medina.
Luis Medina.
And tell us again who Luis Medina is.
Es mi cuñado.
He's my brother-in-law.
Did you know Cristhian Bahena Rivera to drive a black Chevy Malibu?
Solo sabía que tenía un carro negro.
I only knew he had a black car.
Ms. Cervantes, thank you very much. That's all the questions I have.
Ms. Freeze, any redirect?
Just briefly, during the times that you were around Cristhian Bahena Rivera, was he ever violent?
No,
Do you ever remember him fighting with anyone?
I'm going to object against the proper character evidence.
Overruled. Witness may answer if she knows.
No, él no era violento.
no, he was not violent.
Has he been respectful to your brothers-in-law and your husband
Sí.
Yes.
around children?
Oh, sí.
Oh, yes.
Todos los niños lo querían.
All the children loved him.
He was a funny guy, correct?
Judge Ganem cited proper character evidence and specific instances of conduct are not admissible at this time.
Objection's overruled. Witness may answer.
Go ahead.
Yes.
You enjoyed having him around, is that right?
Sí.
Yes.
No further questions.
Ms. Brown, any recross?
No recross, thank you.
Ma'am, thank you for being here. You're excused.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much.
Okay, defense may call its next witness.
We call Iris Gamboa.
Ma'am, let me stop you right there and I'm going to swear you in, okay? Please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Okay, and you'll head right over to that chair, please. Defense, you may proceed when you're ready.
Please state your full name and spell your full name for the record, ma'am.
Iris Monarez Gamboa. IrisMonarez
Where do you live, ma'am?
308 Mitchell Street, Southwest, Cedar Rapids.
Do you live there with anyone?
My boyfriend and my daughter,
What is your daughter's name?
Paulina.
And your daughter Paulina is how old?
She's 5.
Who is Paulina's father?
Cristhian Bahena Rivera.
Now, ma'am, you are here under a subpoena, is that right?
Yes,
And someone served you with a document saying that you must be here, is that right?
yes.
I want you to take the jury through how you met Cristhian Bahena Rivera.
We met at a quinceañera, which is like a sweet 16. That's where we met.
And a quinceañera, that's a Hispanic celebration, is that
Yes.
right? I mean, there would be nothing that would stop me from doing the same for my girls, but that is something that a Hispanic family traditionally celebrates, is that right?
Yes.
Describe for the jury what the celebration is.
It's just pretty much like a sweet 16. You celebrate like from going from like a little girl to like a woman kind of.
So you happen to be at this party, is that right?
Yes.
And Cristhian Bahena Rivera also happened to be at this party, is that right?
Yes.
Approximately how long ago was it that you two met?
2013.
Once you met, did you hit it off?
Yes.
Exchange numbers?
Yes.
Start to date each other as a couple?
Yes.
At some point, did you end up moving in together?
Yes. When I got pregnant.
All right, and that's pregnant with your daughter Paulina, is that right?
Yes.
Where did you two move in together?
At my mom's house.
And you lived there for a while, is that right?
Yes.
At some point, did you decide to establish your own residence?
Yes.
And how did you find a place to live as a family?
Well, he worked at the Yarby farm and we lived on their property.
So he was able to work out something where he was able to live at Yarby Farms, is that right?
Correct.
How long did you and Cristhian Bahena Rivera reside together at that place at Yarby Farms?
From 2016 to 2017.
Your daughter lived there, is that right?
Yes,
Approximately how old was she when you moved there?
she was like a year, I believe.
And when you broke up, were you and my client able to co-parent your daughter as a mother and a father should?
Yes,
And specifically, Christian worked very long hours, is that right?
yes,
When he worked and you were living with him, was he the primary support of your family?
yes.
What approximately were his hours at Yerabee Farms?
About 12 hours.
So he would go to work early in the morning, is that right?
Yes,
And then he would come home around dinner time?
yes.
How many days would he work consecutively?
He would only get his days off every 2 weeks.
So every 2 weeks, he would get
2 days
some time-
off.
He'd get 2 days off.
Yes,
So it'd be 2 weeks on, 2 days off. Is that
Yes.
right? When you and Christian broke up, were you able to work out without involving the courts a parenting arrangement?
yes.
And what did you two work out?
He would give me $250 every 2 weeks because he got paid bi-weekly.
So he'd get paid and he'd pay you every other week. Is that right?
Yes,
So that amount to about $500 a month for the care of Paulina. Is that
Yes.
right? Did Christian have other obligations, to your knowledge, to his family in Mexico?
yes. He would send money to his parents, and he was also making a house over there for them.
And what do you mean he was making a house over there for them?
Yeah, he would send money and to start building a house over there for them.
Now, is it pretty customary for someone to be taking care of their family in Mexico, even if they're residing in the United States?
Yes,
Is it unusual for someone to have family in Mexico that would be a parent or a sibling that they care for?
yes,
Ma'am, I hate to get personal, but I know you were brought to this country fairly early in life. Is that right?
yes.
Do you remember, you weren't born here, right?
No,
Do you remember anything about coming to this country?
no.
Do you know how old you were?
A year and a half.
You are now a citizen, is that right?
No, I have DACA.
Okay, and describe what that is for the jury. They don't know.
It's authorization to work or go to school legally.
And that's something that you have because you've been in the United States so long, is that right?
Yes.
Do your parents enjoy the same privileges that you have?
No,
Your father, is he in this country?
no.
And why not?
He got deported.
How is it that he got deported?
I don't remember, honestly.
If someone is an illegal immigrant in this country, do they fear law enforcement contact?
Yes,
Why?
because they know they'll get deported.
So if someone has law enforcement contact for even a routine traffic stop, is that something that somebody would be fearful of?
Yes,
Now, I asked you to provide, I'm sorry. Now, ma'am, I asked you to provide some pictures of you and your daughter and Cristhian Bahena Rivera. Is that right?
yes,
And did you try to find the most recent pictures that you had available?
I mean, somewhat, yes.
I'm showing you Defendant's Exhibit BBB. Do you see that on the screen?
Yes.
And describe what that picture shows.
That was my daughter's second birthday.
And your daughter was 3 when Cristhian Bahena Rivera was arrested. Is that right?
Yes,
So that would have been the most recent party that you attended together. Is that right?
correct.
Describe where that party was at.
That was at the Brooklyn Park.
Who attended?
Christian's family and myself.
Now there's a big gold thing hanging out in front of the photo. Can you describe what that is?
That's a piñata.
And what is a piñata, ma'am?
It's full of candy, and then the kids get to hit it, and then the candy comes out.
Is that something that's pretty traditional for a Hispanic birthday party?
Yes,
Your Honor, I'd offer Defendant's Exhibit BBB.
Mr. Brown?
I ask a question of the witness, Your Honor.
Yes.
Ms. Gamboa, when was that photograph taken?
June 2016? No, 2017.
Your Honor, based on the age of the photograph, I'd object on relevance grounds.
Your Honor, I point out that my client, there's no pictures prior to August of 2018.
Based on that record, I am going to overrule the objection, and B will be admitted into evidence.
I'd move to publish the exhibit.
Granted.
And the photo's right in front of you, is that right?
Yes.
You and Christian, you were not together as a couple anymore in this photo, is that right?
Yes.
But you were still able to attend family obligations and family events together, is that right?
Yes.
How many people were at this party?
About 25.
And the family members would be who?
Like his aunts and uncles.
So it'd be Christian's family, is
Yes.
that right? And even though your daughter no longer sees Mr. Bahena Rivera, she still maintained a relationship with his family, is that right?
Yes.
You know Alejandra Cervantes, is that right?
Yes.
And she's somebody that you still are friends with, is that right?
Yes.
She spends time in different weekends with Paulina, is that right?
Yes.
And the rest of the family spends time with your daughter, is that right?
Yes.
And is that because you believe it's important for your daughter to know her father's family?
Yes.
Describe Cristhian Bahena Rivera's reaction in that photo.
He was happy that his daughter was happy.
It was a good day for
It was
you.
a good day, yes.
Describe his demeanor in general.
Can you repeat your question?
Describe how he was as a father in general.
He was a really good father. He was responsible, and he always looked after his daughter.
He made sure to take care of her, right?
Yes.
He would send you money even though there's no court order, right?
Yes.
Would he buy things for Paulina in addition to the support that he provided you?
Yes.
What sorts of things?
Like shoes, toys.
Has Cristhian Bahena Rivera ever been violent towards you?
No.
Has he ever been violent towards your daughter?
No.
Has he ever, I mean, I'm sure you two fought from time to time, right?
Yes.
There's a reason that you two broke up.
Yes.
But did Cristhian Bahena Rivera ever express any sort of anger that you believed was excessive?
No.
Other than the normal couples arguing, did he have any sort of anger problems?
No.
Now, you graduated from Brooklyn, is that right?
Yes.
Brooklyn is a high school that has a large Hispanic population, fair to say?
No.
Okay, approximately what percentage would be Hispanic?
Well, from what I recall, in my classroom, there were about 3 of us that were Hispanic.
And how many, what was your graduating class?
About 45 to 50 people.
Was race something that was talked about often in Brooklyn?
Yes.
Objection, Your Honor. Evidence.
Sustained.
Ma'am, you associated with your class, is that correct?
Yes.
I want to ask you about a man named Ulysses Felix. Who is that?
That's my cousin.
And did he also go to Brooklyn High School?
Yes.
What year was he in relation to you?
I believe he was 2 years younger.
Did Ulysses Felix know Cristhian Bahena Rivera?
Yes.
Has Ulysses Felix spent time at Cristhian Rivera Bahena's house?
Yes.
Did Ulysses Felix know Dalton Jack?
Yes.
Objection. Speculation.
Overruled, the witness may know, may answer if she knows.
Yes.
Did you know Dalton Jack?
Yes.
Do you have an opinion as to Dalton Jack's demeanor?
From what I recall, I remember he was pretty racist. He
No
would-
further questions.
Mr. Claver, any cross?
Yes, Your Honor.
Actually, before you do so, Mr. Claver and Ms. Freeze, why don't you approach real quick? Mr. Claver, you may proceed with your cross-examination of this witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Gamboa, you lived with Cristhian Bahena Rivera for 4 years, isn't that right?
Yes, about 4 years.
And you were familiar with the type of vehicle he drove?
Yes,
And that was a black Chevy Malibu?
yes.
And can you tell me again the date that you broke up with Cristhian Bahena Rivera?
April of 2017.
After you broke up, you didn't have very much contact with him, is that correct?
Whatever was related to our daughter, yes.
And how often would that have been?
Pretty often. I mean, throughout the week, he would text and ask about her. And on his days off, he would come for her.
Do you recall speaking with the defendant then in August of 2018?
Yes,
And during one of those conversations, the defendant told you that he had contact with law enforcement,
yes.
and that contact was regarding the disappearance of Mollie Tibbetts. Isn't
I
that
believe
right?
so.
And this was prior to his arrest, correct?
Correct.
And you talked to law enforcement at some point in time, isn't that right?
Yes.
Would that have been in August and September of 2018?
I don't remember the exact date, but yes, around there.
And during those interviews with law enforcement, you were asked about the defendant,
Yes,
and you were asked about whether you were familiar with any mental health issues that he may have had.
correct.
And you stated that you weren't aware that he had any.
Yes,
And you stated in that interview you weren't aware of any periods where he claimed to have blacked out.
yes,
And you stated in that interview that you weren't aware of any periods where the defendant had memory issues, correct?
correct.
Thank you, Ms. Campbell. I have no further questions for you.
Any redirect?
No, Your Honor. Thank you.
Ma'am, thank you for being here. You're excused. Members of the jury, that completes our work for the morning. We'll be at recess for lunch until 1 o'clock. Want to remind you of your admonition. Make sure you're not discussing the case with anyone. Make sure you're not doing any type of independent research or having any media exposure. You leave your notebooks where they are. They'll be collected and held by the court attendant over the lunch recess. And again, let's be back here ready to go at 1 o'clock today. Thank you. Truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Okay, Ms. Young, right there, if you would, please. All right, the defense may proceed when it's ready.
Please state your full name.
My name is Anna Young, and my last name is spelled Young.
Where are you employed?
I'm employed by the Iowa Division of Criminal Investigation, Criminalistics Laboratory in Ankeny, Iowa.
How long have you been employed at the Division of Criminal Investigation Crime Laboratory?
Approximately 10 years.
What are your official duties?
I'm assigned to the impression evidence section. The majority of what we do is latent print analysis. So we process or evaluate latent prints on physical evidence. We compare and render decisions based on those conclusions.
How long have you been working in the field of fingerprints?
Approximately 10 years.
Tell us about your education and your previous employment.
I have a bachelor's of science degree in anthropology from Iowa State University. I also have a master's degree in forensic science from Nebraska Wesleyan University. I began my career with the Des Moines Police Department in their crime scene unit for approximately 5 years. And then I began my employment with the Iowa Division of Criminal Investigation. I entered a structured 2-year training program where I was able to attend outside training as well as be mentored under a qualified examiner. I am also a certified latent print examiner through the International Association for Identification. I'm sorry, which part?
The name of the last sentence.
International Association for Identification.
Have you provided my office with a CV that thoroughly discusses your training and experience?
I did.
I'd offer Defendant's Exhibit B at this time.
Just so I'm clear, did you say B as in boy?
B is in
Okay.
Valentine.
All right, thank you. Mr. Brown, any concerns about that?
No objection.
Defendant's Exhibit V is entered into evidence.
Do you have any specialized training in the relation to latent prints?
I do. I completed my structured 2-year training program and I attend trainings annually.
Briefly educate us on what a latent print is.
A latent print is the chance reproduction of the friction-ridged skin, which is the skin that's on your palms, your fingers, the soles of your feet and your toes, on the surface of an object, usually in sweat or body oils.
Would a person's, let's say, would my latent prints match any other person?
No, they should be individual to each person. And so all of your fingers are different from each other and different from everyone else.
What does friction ridge skin mean?
It's the ridge skin that's on the palms of your hands, your fingers, the soles of your feet, and your toes.
How is fingerprint evidence submitted to your lab?
It can be submitted in various ways. Sometimes agencies will provide us with physical objects to process for latent prints. Sometimes we receive what we consider latent print lifts that are objects that have been processed by someone else at a crime scene and then submitted to us for examination.
I want to talk to you about this case. And specifically, you were submitted some items that were found in the back of a trunk of a black Malibu. Is that right?
That's correct.
Could you describe for the jury what you received from the black Malibu, the trunk specifically?
Do you want me to go through each object that was in there?
I want you to describe it in general, and then we'll talk about what you did with it.
To ensure the accuracy of my testimony, would it be okay if I referred to my notes?
That's fine.
Thank you. I'm referring to the laboratory item 62. And within that laboratory item, there were 14 items that I individualized as 62.1 through 62.14 that I then examined for latent prints. 62.1 was a red ice scraper. 62.2 was a clear storage box with fishing hooks. 62.3 was an empty Pepsi can. 62.4 was a pink child's ear exam toy. 62.5 were egg sinkers plastic bag. 62.6 was snap-on floats bag with floats inside. 62.7 was a black plastic plug. 62.8 was a black piece of plastic tubing. 62.9 was a volleyball. 62.10 were Marlboro coupons. 62.11 was a gray plastic Walmart bag. 62.12 was a SpongeBob feed bag. 62.13 was a partial roll of wrapping paper. 62.14 was a black plastic vehicle part.
So in this case, you received all of those items in your lab. Is that correct?
That's correct.
What were you requested to do with those items that were found in this trunk?
I was requested to process them for possible latent prints.
Did you process each and every item?
I did.
Were you able to find any latent prints suitable for identification on any of those items?
Yes, I was.
Which items were you able to find latent prints suitable for identification?
62.1 and 62.2, which were the ice scraper and the fishing plastic box, respectively.
Let's talk first about the ice scraper. You were able to develop how many latent prints?
1.
Did you analyze those prints?
I did.
And when you analyze those prints, describe the process that you use.
When we first look at an object, we look at it for suitability when we look at a latent print. And what we're looking for is what we call individual characteristics. And that means it can be broken down into basically 3 things: a bifurcation where 2 ridges come up and one ridge comes up and splits into 2, an ending ridge where a ridge comes up and ends, and a dot, which is exactly what it sounds like. So we're looking for those individual characteristics and their relationship to each other, and then in relationship to the print overall. If we feel like there's enough of those individual characteristics, then we will conduct a comparison. And in this case, I did conduct a comparison.
Right, so you found 1 latent print on the scraper, is that right?
That's correct.
And then you also found 2 latent prints on another item, is that correct?
It's 3.
3 latent prints, okay. Where did you find those?
The 3 latent prints were located on the fishing clear plastic box.
After you've developed the latent prints, you then try to compare them with other prints known to the case or the system, is that right?
That's correct.
And in this case, did you do that?
I did.
Okay, what were your results? Let's first talk about the scraper.
The scraper, the latent print, was what I classified as an impression, which means I couldn't tell if it was from a finger or a palm print. And I wasn't able to make a conclusive same source comparison in this case.
What about the box 62.2?
62.2A was also an impression, which means I couldn't determine whether or not it was a finger or a palm, and I was not able to make a same source conclusion for that impression. 62.2B and C were fingerprints, and I was able to say they were not made by the same source as the copies of finger impressions bearing the name Cristhian Bahena Rivera.
All right, so you're provided with Mr. Bahena Rivera's fingerprints, is that right?
I was.
And you compared those fingerprints to 62.2B and 62.2C, is that right?
I compared them to all 4 of them.
All right, but in reference to 62.2B and 62.2C, you were able to eliminate Cristhian Bahena Rivera as a source of those prints, is that correct?
They were not made by the same source.
No further questions, thank you.
Mr. Brown, you may cross-examine,
Thank
or
you.
the state, I should say.
That's mine, Judge. Thank you. Ms. Young, did you assist in attempting to obtain the fingerprints off of a body later known as Mollie Tibbetts?
I did.
And describe for the jury what you did in an attempt to get identifiable fingerprints off of Mollie Tibbetts' body.
I proceeded to the medical examiner's office twice in an attempt to gain Ms. Tibbetts' known fingerprints. Ms. Tibbetts' remains were not in a condition where I was able to obtain any known prints from her.
Okay, so you weren't ever able to get the known fingerprints of Mollie Tibbetts, correct?
I was not.
And as far as you know, they did not exist anywhere in any system that you had access to do any type of comparison. Would that be also true?
Not to my knowledge.
The 2 prints that were suitable for identification that you found on items in the trunk of the black Chevy Malibu were on fishing equipment. Would that be a fair characterization?
3 of them were on the plastic box that contained fishing equipment.
Can you tell the jury when a fingerprint is placed upon any item?
I cannot.
And is it very possible that the prints that you identified on the plaque or the plastic box could have been placed there weeks or even months before?
They could.
What does it take, in your estimation, to destroy an identifiable fingerprint? And what I'm referring to, I don't mean to throw you a curveball, but what I'm referring to is if there's an identifiable print on an object like the fishing box, how is that print, how would it be destroyed?
It could be destroyed numerous ways. Repetitive touching is one. If someone picks up something the same way over and over again, if a surface is smeared, or if it's been cleaned, if it's been left out in the elements, those are some variables that can go into whether or not it stays for a particular period of time.
And if it's protected from those elements, how long can a fingerprint stay on any given item?
Indefinitely.
And are you aware, Ms. Young, that Mollie Tibbetts has been associated with the trunk of the black Malibu where the items that you tested came from?
I have, yes.
Is it very possible, in your opinion, that Mollie Tibbetts could have touched those things while in the trunk and you just have nothing to compare it to? Is that possible?
It's possible.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Any redirect?
Yes, ma'am. It's also possible that another person could have touched that item in the trunk, isn't it?
It's possible.
Now, the fingerprints that were submitted on behalf of Cristhian Bahena Rivera were not of good quality. Is that correct?
They were not complete known impressions.
What do you mean by that?
I mean that the entire portions of the palms and the fingers were not recorded adequately to make a determination as to whether or not they came from the same source.
You noted in your report that clear and complete major case prints are necessary to complete the entire comparison. Isn't that right?
That's correct.
And so specifically, did you communicate with investigators saying if you had better prints, you might be able to get more information?
I communicated through my report.
Were any other fingerprint cards submitted in reference to Cristhian Bahena Rivera?
No, they were not.
Now, if further prints had been submitted, you would have compared those. Isn't that right?
That's correct.
And so you could have further examined the evidence and looked at it to see if my client's prints matched those for identification. Is that correct?
I could have done additional comparisons.
Along with that is if other fingerprints on behalf of other possible suspects were submitted, you could compare those for identification. Isn't that right?
That's correct.
But where we stand here, we don't know who made the prints that are in the trunk. Is that correct?
That's correct.
No further questions.
Mr. Brown, anything else for this witness?
No, Your Honor.
Ma'am, thank you for being here. You're excused.
Thank you.
Your Honor, defense recalls Dalton Jack.
Okay, Mr. Jack, I'm going to swear you in again. Could you raise your right hand, please? Do you swear or affirm the testimony about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help you God.
Yes.
Okay. And you know where to be seated? All right. Mr. Freeze, you can proceed when you're ready.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Jack.
Good afternoon.
You testified here a few days back, correct?
Yes.
Had a chance to reflect on that testimony?
No.
You haven't thought about what you had to say?
No.
I'm sorry, you had to speak up some.
Oh, sorry. No.
So there's nothing about your testimony here in open court the other day you wish to clarify, correct?
No. Clarified.
Okay. Mr. Jack, I want to expand on a few things we talked about the other day. Is that okay with you?
Yes.
The first thing I want to talk about, Mr. Jack, is Mollie Tibbetts herself. Tell me first, if you would, describe in your own words Mollie Tibbetts.
She was a happy, bubbly, goofy person that just everybody kind of got along with.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that last part.
Everybody got along with her?
Everybody got along with her?
Yeah, for the most part, yeah.
She was kind?
Yes.
Kind to everybody she met?
Yes.
Did you know her to have an enemy?
No.
Did you know her to have any confrontations with anyone?
No.
How about strangers? How did she treat people she never met before?
She was nice to strangers.
You've had a long time to think about this and think about Mollie's loss of life. Can you think of anyone who would have wanted to visit her any harm?
No.
Would you agree with me that she was the kind of person who always put a best face on for others?
Absolutely, yes.
She always wanted to make those around her feel better, right?
Yes.
And she always wanted to appear happy, right?
Yes.
If somebody needed a hand, she was always there to offer it.
Yes.
Whether she knew you or didn't know you, she was always willing to help, right?
Yes.
Describe Mollie's physical stature. I mean, she was small, right?
Yeah, she was a very small individual.
Okay, when you say very small, I mean, well, how tall is she?
5'2", 5'3",
And do you know her weight?
130-ish pounds.
Okay, so she was a small woman, small framed.
Yes.
Was she the kind of person who, though, if she were attacked, would be one to fight back?
I mean, anybody would, but yeah.
Okay, she was spunky.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, again, you can't think of anybody in this world who would want to visit harm upon this particular individual, right?
No, sir.
And do you know her as well as anyone, in your opinion?
Yeah.
Okay. When she would go jogging, would anyone ever stop and just talk to her?
Not that she'd ever mentioned before.
Okay. Well, if someone was stopping to talk to her when she was out on a jog around Brooklyn, is she the kind of person who would have a conversation with someone,
She would talk to him, yeah.
whether she knew him or not?
Yeah, most likely.
Would that even translate to someone out on a country road?
I would imagine so, yes.
So if someone comes up to her on a country road and wants to talk to her, she's the kind of person that would strike up a conversation?
She wouldn't strike up the conversation, but yeah, she would have a conversation with that person.
Okay. So knowing what you know about Mollie Tibbetts, if she were out on a country road jogging and someone comes up and talks to her, she's the kind of person who would stop and have a conversation with that person.
She would stop and say at least hello. Yes.
She wouldn't immediately get scared or angry, would she?
No.
She wouldn't immediately get confrontational, would she?
Not.
Sustained.
Based upon your experience and knowing Mollie, do you think she would be the kind of person that would do that?
She wouldn't.
Objection. Same question.
Overruled, the witness may answer if he knows.
She wouldn't do any of that unless she was provoked to.
Okay. And how long did you know Mollie before she disappeared?
We had been dating for 3 years, but we went to a very small school, so we'd known each other, or at least of each other, for a very long time.
But what's a very long time, Mr. Jack?
I believe she moved from California to Brooklyn in the 4th grade, and I was a year older than her, so since the 5th, we would have known of each other.
Okay, so 4th grade is, help me here, 9 years old?
I don't know either. I'm gonna be real.
You knew her for probably at least 10 years, right?
Yes.
And she didn't become this nice, happy person overnight, did she?
No.
She was always this way. Am I right?
For as long as I can remember, yes.
And you said she wouldn't do this as far as getting angry unless she was provoked. Is my understanding correct?
Yes.
In the 10 years you knew her, tell me how many times you saw her get provoked.
So I'd like to reframe and say that I didn't, hang out with her very often or know her that well outside of the 3 years that we dated. So I can't speak on those 7 years, but those 3 years that we were together, not very often.
Less than 5?
I'd say that's fair, yeah.
0 probably.
Yeah.
No one ever provoked Mollie.
I'm going to object. He's already asked and answered the question.
Overruled, the witness can answer, and then we'll move on.
No one ever provoked Mollie in the 3 years you were together, right?
I mean, not to my knowledge, I guess.
She was one who liked to de-escalate situations, didn't she?
Don't object again. This is asked and answered. Same ground we're plowing again.
Question's not been asked and answered, so it's overruled. Go ahead and answer if you know, sir.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Can you read it back, please?
She was one who liked to de-escalate situations, didn't she?
Yes, I would say so.
In your relationship with Mollie, like any relationship, there's usually one personality who's a little stronger than the other personality. Would you agree that that was kind of your relationship with Mollie?
I guess so, yeah.
Would you describe yourself as the stronger personality or the weaker personality?
In terms of what?
Would you get angry more than Mollie?
Yeah.
And how would Mollie respond to you those times that she would get angry? You would get angry, I'm sorry.
I mean, she would try to calm me down, that's for sure.
Sure. And that was her nature, right?
Yes.
Even when you had done something that clearly was wrong to her, she always took the high road. Is that a fair statement?
I don't remember any instances in which that was the case, but yeah.
Okay. And we'll talk about those in a bit. Now, it's your testimony, Mr. Jack, that you had nothing to do with Mollie Tibbetts' abduction. Is that what I am to understand?
Yes.
You had nothing to do with Mollie Tibbetts' death, right?
Correct.
You loved her too much, is that right?
That, and I wouldn't harm her or any innocent person, but yes.
You two were going to get married, is that right?
Yes.
Did she know this?
Yeah.
Okay, what were the plans?
Plans were my brother's wedding was to be in Punta Cana about, I don't remember the exact date, but it was August. We had already gotten passports and everything to go down there. And I was going to propose on the beach down while my Blake's wedding.
So did Mollie know you were going to propose on the beach?
Yeah, I kind of jumped the gun on that one in bed and I just spilled the beans.
To Mollie?
Yes.
And when and where did you spill the beans?
I mean, in my bed at Blake's house.
When?
I don't remember the exact time, but it was, I don't know, shortly after they had made the plans to do the wedding down in Punta Cana.
Okay. And when were the plans made for the wedding in Punta Cana with Blake and Allie?
That was Blake and Allie's wedding plans in
Yes.
general. They were doing a destination wedding, and the whole family was going down there to watch them get married. Yeah.
Sure. What I'm trying to figure out is when were the plans made by you to propose to Mollie on the beach and you spilled the beans? Was it a year before Mollie's death? Was it 2 years before Mollie's death?
Oh, I'm sorry, sir. I don't know the exact timeline on that. It was not very. It wasn't. It was probably under a year.
Okay. And Mollie said yes?
Yes.
You bought her a ring,
Yes.
an engagement ring.
Yeah.
And where'd you buy it?
K Jewelers.
And was she wearing it?
No.
Where were you keeping it?
At the house.
What'd you pay for it?
$2,500 ish.
And you'll agree with me that during that year between when the beans were spilled and Mollie disappeared, you and Mollie's relationship went up and down several times, right?
Correct. Yes.
You guys talked about breaking up a number of times, right?
Correct. Yes.
And the most recent time you talked about breaking up was the end of June, 1 month before she disappeared, right?
I don't recall, but if that's on a record somewhere, then I would agree. Yes.
Okay. How many television interviews did you give after Mollie's disappearance, Mr. Jack?
I don't know Jack's irrelevant.
Overruled at this time. We'll see.
I don't have an answer to that. It was a lot. I didn't keep count.
When's the last time you talked to Jordan Lamb?
In terms of like,
Talk?
no, she messaged me about coming here to testify. That would be the last time that I talked to her.
How'd she message you?
Over Snapchat.
She called you over Snapchat.
Yes.
And you two talked about your testimony?
No, she just asked me why she was having to come here. That's about it.
Now, Snapchat, you can call people like a telephone on Snapchat, right?
Yeah, that was news to me too. I didn't know that.
Okay, so when you use Snapchat, you always did the like texting thing, right?
Yeah.
Never used it like a phone?
No.
Now, last week when you were here, you gave some testimony about after Mollie disappeared and you realized that she was truly missing. Do you recall that testimony?
I'm sorry. Can you repeat the question?
Sure. Last week when you were here testifying and you truly realized that she was missing, you took some action. You recall that testimony?
In terms, like, I remember what I did whenever that happened. Yes.
Sure. What'd you do?
I immediately started making phone calls and getting people to try to check on her.
Okay. Did you try to call Mollie?
Yes.
How many times did you try to call Mollie?
I don't have an exact number for that. I'm sorry.
Well, guess for me.
I guess would be completely inaccurate, but I'll give you maybe 10.
Is it possible you only called Mollie one time?
Sure. Yes.
So how many times did you text her?
I also don't have a number for you on that one.
So if the records show you only called her one time, those would be the accurate number.
Absolutely. Yes.
Explain to me why you only tried to call your girlfriend who was missing one time in the days following her disappearance.
I don't know. I've tried to get other people to look for her as well.
She's the love of your life, right?
Yes.
And you're not blowing up her phone?
I don't know if I did or not, but I don't know why I would only call her one time.
Well, if I showed you your phone records, would it refresh your recollection?
Yes.
Question approach?
Go ahead.
Mr. Jack, I'm showing you your phone records from July 15, 2018 through July 19, 2018. Go ahead, take a look at those.
I'm sorry. I don't know how to read this. What am I looking at?
Mr. Jack, in your phone, you had a contact for Mollie, right?
Yep.
And what'd you call her?
Baby girl. I called her baby girl.
So anytime you would call her or she would call you, it would come up as baby girl.
Correct.
So your phone records, if they dumped your phone, we should look for an outgoing call or an incoming call from baby girl.
Yes.
And like when you're calling your dad, it says dad, right?
Yes.
Mom says mom, right?
Yes.
Okay. You don't use your phone that much as a phone, do you?
But what do you mean?
You're more of a texter.
Yeah. I mean, not anymore, but yeah.
Okay. So with that. And I placed the document in front of you to refresh your recollection, Mr. Jack. You see that document?
Yes.
Are you able to read that document?
The format's kind of weird, but I think I can piece it together for you. Yeah.
Okay, if you can piece it together for me, that's a phone record, correct?
Yeah.
And that phone record shows the dates of 7/15/2018 through 7/19/2018, correct?
I'm going to object to this witness using this as a reference. He's not an expert with regard to phone records. I'm not sure if he's going to refresh his memory, then he should allow it to refresh his memory instead of putting in what's in the document through testimony of a witness who clearly did not create it.
Are you trying to refresh his memory?
Yes.
Okay, we'll proceed that way then.
It refreshes your recollection, Mr. Jack?
Yes.
Has it done so?
Sure. Yes.
Having your recollection refreshed now, tell the jury how many times the name baby girl shows up on here.
Was highlighted once and check mark once.
Okay. You recall your testimony the other day about Jordan Lamb?
Yes.
You told Mr. Brown that the relationship with Jordan Lamb was like a one-day thing, right?
Yes.
That's not true, is it?
What do you mean by that?
You had more than one relationship, more than one time having a relationship with Jordan Lamb, right?
Not to my recollection, by any means.
You recall having conversations with Mollie going back to early 2017 where she was angry with Jordan?
Yes.
And why was that?
Overruled.
Why was she angry with Jordan?
I don't know.
Actually, I am going to object to that on other grounds. He can not speculate as to what Mollie Tibbetts may have thought. That's what he's asking this young man. We would object on speculation.
Okay, that's a different objection, and that objection I'll sustain.
But you do acknowledge that Mollie was upset with Jordan in as early as January of 2017.
Same objection.
Given how the question is phrased, I'm going to overrule it. And again, the witness can answer if he knows.
I don't know.
In April of 2017, Mollie was happy that you deleted Jordan off Snapchat. You recall that?
No.
You don't? Do you recall having a telephone or a text conversation with Mollie in April, specifically April 6, 2017, where Mollie said to you that she was definitely glad you deleted Jordan off Snapchat?
I do.
Objective calls for hearsay. It's also not relevant.
Overruled.
I do not remember that, sir.
If I showed you a record of that conversation, would it refresh your recollection?
Yes.
Mr. Jack, is your recollection refreshed now?
Yes.
Mollie said that to you.
It's on a record for a text. Yes.
And does it refresh your recollection as at all as to why she was upset?
She didn't seem upset in that text chain.
Do you know why she said she was definitely glad you deleted Jordan off Snapchat?
Objection to the calls for speculation.
Sustained.
Tell the jury how you responded to that comment.
Molly's said that she was glad that she deleted me off Snapchat because Jordan was wearing apparently a skimpy outfit and put it on her story, and that Mollie didn't want me seeing that. And then I responded with "she a hoe," and then the conversation then went from there.
You said "she a hoe."
That is the exact verbiage that I just read on that sheet. Yes.
What does that mean?
I think that was just a slang term, I guess. I don't know how to put that, but
I don't understand.
saying that she was immorally and straight, I guess.
An immoral woman?
Sure.
Was it a flattering comment?
That was not a flattering comment. No.
And it's your testimony that she wasn't upset about the relationship between you and Jordan at this point.
Objection, Judge. Calls for speculation.
Sustained.
You recall buying Mollie a promise ring in May of 2017.
Yes.
You recall Mollie taking off that promise ring in June of 2017.
Yes, I do.
Why did she take it off?
Objections. Calls for speculation.
Sustained.
Do you know why Mollie took it off?
Objection. Same objection.
Different question.
and different ruling. Witness may answer if he knows.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Do you know why she took it off?
Why she took off the promise ring?
Yes.
Because of the relationship with Jordan,
What relationship with Jordan?
the one that had been previously stated of our affair, I guess you would call it.
So you had a relationship with Jordan pre-June 2017.
Objections, asked and answered.
Overruled. I'll let the witness answer.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question again?
Prior to June 2017, you had the sexual relationship with Jordan Lamb.
Not sexual, no.
Okay. So Mollie takes off the ring because of what relationship then with Jordan?
It was like a texting, I guess, relationship.
Tell us more about that.
I don't remember like the semantics of it, but we talked back and forth.
What about?
Anything, I guess.
What's anything? I mean, obviously it made Mollie upset enough to take off her promise ring.
Objections calls for hearsay.
Overruled. The witness may answer if he knows.
I would love to give you an answer, sir, but I don't know.
You don't recall?
Don't recall.
So when I asked you earlier about Mollie's issues with Jordan and you maybe having a relationship of some sort with Jordan going back to 2017, is your recollection refreshed now?
I don't remember any other than like the one-time physical relationship with Jordan. I don't remember any other time that happened.
Well, you were texting her in 2017, right?
Yes.
And then in 2018, before Mollie goes to California, you start texting her or Snapchatting her again, right?
Yes.
And that's when it got physical, right?
Yes.
Yes, sex with her in 2018, right before Mollie went to California, right?
I don't know.
Okay. Is it possible you had sex with her before then?
Yes.
So this whole Jordan thing had been going on for a year, right?
Don't object to the formal questions mischaracterized what the witness has said so far with regard to his relationship with Jordan Lamb.
Well, I think the point's well taken. I'm going to sustain it. And Mr. Freeze, if you want to attempt to rephrase it, that's fine.
So we know in 2017, Mollie's upset with you because you're having some sort of relationship, whether it's texting or whatever with Jordan. And we know it happens again in 2018, right?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question? I couldn't hear you.
You read it back.
We know in 2017, Mollie is upset with you because you're having some sort of relationship, whether it is texting or whatever, and we know it happens again in 2018, right?
Yes.
So between June of 2017, when Mollie takes the promise ring off, and tell us what the promise ring signifies.
Promise ring signifies like, it's not an engagement ring. It's like a precursor to an engagement ring, I guess, if that makes sense.
You promised yourself to her.
Yes.
You gave her this ring and said, I'm yours and yours only, right?
Yes.
You gave her an oath of fidelity, right?
Yes.
And then a month later, she finds out you weren't living up to that oath, right?
Yes.
Okay. Between the time she took her promise ring off and then the following spring, when she goes to California, you and Jordan continued to have some sort of relationship, didn't you?
I don't know.
You telling me you didn't text her or Snapchat her, nothing like that?
Not that I can recall at all.
Okay. But you certainly did in April of 2018. You tried to strike up a new relationship with her, didn't you?
Not that I can recall on that either.
Well, April of 2018, you and Mollie had a text conversation where she got upset because Jordan screenshot something from her Snapchat story, right?
Not that I recall, but I believe it, yeah.
You don't recall having a conversation with Mollie where she asked you, yo, why did she screenshot this?
No.
You don't recall Mollie saying to you she was about to get confrontational?
No, I don't remember that either.
I showed you a record of that conversation. Would it refresh your recollection?
Yes.
Does that refresh recollection?
Yes.
Having your recollection refreshed, do you now recall having a conversation on April 8th, 2018 with Mollie about Jordan snapshotting or screenshotting a Snapchat?
I still don't remember the conversation in full, but yeah, I remember that happening.
And that conversation was about Jordan, right?
Yes.
And you told Mollie that Jordan was crazy, right?
Yes.
Object is relevance as well as hearsay on all of this.
Overruled. Witness may answer.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that question?
You told Mollie that Jordan was crazy, right?
I don't know. I only read that front page, sir. I'm sorry. I
Well,
didn't
if I showed you
know.
the second page, would it help you?
Yes. Not trying to cause problems up here. I'm sorry. Okay.
Is your recollection refreshed?
Yep. I'm sorry. Yes.
That was my recitation of what this conversation was about wrong?
No.
So she was confronting you about Jordan screenshotting something, right?
Yes.
And correct me if I'm wrong, you had deleted Jordan off your Snapchat before, right?
Yes.
Now, tell us how Snapchat works. For someone to see you on Snapchat, you have to add them, right?
That was through Mollie's Snapchat. She Snapchatted Mollie's
Okay.
story, not mine.
So you hadn't added her through Snapchat?
Not that I can recall, no.
Okay, because I'm looking at a comment here from you. It says she added me again and snapped me some rude ass shit about me.
About, I'm sorry, what?
We don't want to object to reading in contents of the record as improper as hearsay.
Sustained.
Jack, I want you to read the first highlighted portion. Tell me if that refreshes your recollection. Does that refresh your recollection?
I suppose so.
Well, yes or no?
Yes.
So Snapchat works where someone can only communicate with you if you add them, right?
Yes.
And to add them, that takes an affirmative action by you, right?
Yes.
And you told Molly that she added you, and therefore you added her back, right?
You don't have to be able to send messages.
But you were communicating with her, weren't you?
From the context of that text message, it sounded like she was just communicating with me.
Okay. Well, the next day, Jordan was communicating with Molly, wasn't she?
I don't recall, but
For clarification, what's the date that we're talking about here again? I don't believe we have a context, so I would object on that basis.
Well, I guess then I'll sustain the objection, and Mr. Freeze, you can proceed at this point in time, but we need a date, some reference point that we're talking about.
I had said April 8th. So now we're talking about April 9th. Molly and Jordan had talked, right?
I don't recall.
You don't recall Jordan sending copies of messages to Molly?
No.
You don't recall Molly busting you with Snapchat messages between you and Jordan?
Object to the form of the question. It's already made.
Sustained.
You don't recall Molly confronting you with messages sent to her by Jordan Lamb of you and her talking?
I don't recall that, no.
Do you deny sending messages to Jordan Lamb while Molly was leaving for California in 2018?
No, I don't.
So you admit that you were having a text message or a Snapchat conversation with Jordan Lamb in March and April 2018.
I don't recall it, so I'm not going to admit it, but I'm not going to admit it, but I'm not going to deny it either.
Okay.
I guess. Like, probably word that.
But on April 8, 2018, having your recollection refreshed, you didn't just come clean to Molly and say, I've been talking to Jordan, did you?
Probably did not.
Do you recall talking to Agent Matt George on July 27th?
That name doesn't ring a bell, no.
You recall talking to DCI agents?
Yes, I talked to a lot of them.
You recall talking to the one who interviewed you last?
No.
You recall meeting with a DCI agent and them saying you didn't come forward to us originally with information about Jordan Lamb?
Objections, also what you're saying.
Sustained.
Do you recall having a conversation with Agent Matt George on July 27, 2018?
No.
Do you recall telling him that you just came clean about Jordan Lamb right away to Molly?
Objections, also what you're saying.
Overruled.
No, I don't.
Okay. So if he testifies to that, his recollection would probably be more clear than yours, wouldn't it?
Objections, calls for speculation as to what somebody else may have thought.
Sustained.
So April 9th, 2018, you and Molly, you don't recall having a conversation with her about Jordan Lamb?
No, sir.
You don't recall her asking if you wanted to be with Jordan over her?
No, sir.
Everybody objects, calls for what you're saying.
Overruled. Go ahead.
If I showed you a record of that, would that refresh your recollection?
We'll find out. Yes.
A simple yes will do.
Okay.
Mr. Jack, does that document refresh your recollection?
That one does not refresh my recollection. I still don't remember any of that, but I clearly said or did it.
Said or did what?
I mean, that's my phone number on that page, and that's her phone number on that page. So that conversation is between us.
But you don't remember it?
No, I don't remember it.
Did you black it out?
I just don't remember it.
This is a day after the Dalton or the Jordan Lamb discussion, right?
Yes, I believe that's what the date is.
Was she wearing her promise ring at this time?
I don't remember that either.
Remember the other day we talked about whether or not you were known to get angry and fight, right?
Yes.
Now, whoever did this to Mollie committed a very violent crime. Can we agree on that?
Yes.
And would you agree with me that the person that committed it was very angry?
I don't know the mindset of the person that did it, but
Anger could be one of those mindsets, couldn't it?
yes.
At any point in the 12 months before Mollie disappeared, did you ever tell her that you realized you were clinically insane?
I have.
It's not relevant. I'm not sure there's a time frame that's on it. If he did put one on it, I don't think it's relevant.
You referenced within the last year, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, objection's overruled.
I don't remember that at all either.
Did you ever, within the, well, let's just pick this date, October 31, 2017. Did you mention to Mollie that you have a temper?
I don't remember.
Did you, on October 31, mention to Mollie that a person can't tell till you see it in action?
I
Judge, I'm going to object calls for hearsay, whether it's Dalton's statement or somebody else's.
Sustained.
Did you and Mollie have a conversation that included those comments?
I don't remember it.
Would you seeing a document that said that, refresh your recollection?
Yes.
While we're looking for that, let's move on, Mr. Jack. You recall in October 30, 2017, you and Mollie's relationship kind of hit a real bump, didn't it?
I don't recall that either. No.
That's when she told you she was moving in with friends.
Then yeah, I remember.
And that upset you.
Yes, I did.
You told her you were angry about that.
Yes.
She was ditching you.
Yes.
That's the term you used, right?
Yes.
And even in that date, you told her you were thinking about breaking up during college, right?
I don't recall that at all.
Let's just document it, look at it. Going back to the temper thing. Refresh recollection, Mr. Jack.
Judge, prior to doing that, can we get a date and time on this particular document he's showing?
October 31, 2017.
Thank you.
Does that document refresh your recollection?
I do not remember the context in which that was said at all, sir.
Does it refresh your recollection?
What is that? No.
You don't recall telling Mollie that you had a temper?
No.
You don't recall saying that's what makes you dangerous?
No.
But the record says that. Do you deny the accuracy of the record?
No.
Do you deny?
Please, let me jump in and stop you. We need to take a break. Members of the jury, we'll take a 10-minute recess. Want to remind you of your admonition. You can leave your notebooks where they are, and you can exit when you're ready. Mr. Jack, you can go ahead and step down, okay? Back on the record in the presence of the jury, Mr. Bahena is present along with the attorneys of record. Mr. Jack, I want to remind you, you're still under oath. Mr. Freeze, you may continue.
Thank you. Mr. Jack, the other day, you made an answer to a question posed by Mr. Brown, and your answer was you wholeheartedly think that my client's guilty, right?
I'm going to object, actually. That's not in the purview of this witness, not relevant.
Well, the answer's already been given. So I think
That's fine.
I think the objection is untimely, given that we already have the answer in the record. So we can proceed.
Right?
Yes.
And do you know Iris Gamboa?
I graduated with her, yes.
How well do you know Iris?
Not very well.
She testified here today that she said you're a racist. You share that opinion?
No.
You don't hold any anti-Mexican opinions?
No.
Have you ever used derogatory language toward Hispanics?
Not that I can remember, no.
Have you ever used the term fucking dipshit Mexicans?
I'm going to object to the relevance. He's denied any comments.
Sustained.
If I showed you a document, your phone records from October 26, 2017, would that refresh your recollection?
Yes.
I'm going to object on the same grounds if that's what the content of this is.
Mr. Freeze, not knowing what you're wanting to refresh him on, I would just ask you to keep in mind the court's previous ruling. And if you're going down that road, it's going to be the same ruling.
I guess, of course, I'm somewhat vague on the court's statement there.
Okay. Do you need the previous question and ruling read back to you?
Can we approach?
Sure. Go ahead, Mr. Freeze.
Thank you. Now, Mr. Jack, you recall on July 6, 2018, 12 days prior to Mollie's disappearance, having a conversation with her via text message, indicating to her that you were madder than fuck for no reason?
I do not recall that conversation.
I showed you a text message report of that. Would it refresh your recollection?
Yes.
Judge, I'm going to object on the basis of relevance.
Overruled. Go ahead.
Does that refresh your recollection?
I still don't remember the conversation, no.
Okay. You're a smart guy, right?
I'm not going to stroke my own ego here, but sure.
Yeah, you, in some of the interviews, said to agents that you had your college paid for because your ACT scores were so high, right?
Yes.
How high were they?
Judge, I'm going to object to the relevance.
Sustained.
Is there anything wrong with your memory organically?
No.
You don't have any illness?
I've had multiple concussions.
Okay, is that affecting your memory, do you think?
I don't know. No.
Okay. Has any doctor diagnosed you with any reason that you can't recall things?
No.
Do you recall the Snapchat message conversation with Jordan Lamb where you told her you wanted to get with her?
No, I do not.
You don't recall saying to Jordan Lamb that if you do get together with her, that you had to be quiet because you weren't going to jail because she was under 18?
I'm going to object. There's no time frame that's put on this. That's not relevant at this point.
I will sustain that, Mr. Freeze, and again, we need some more context to go forward.
In March of, or April of 2018, you don't recall having a Snapchat conversation with Jordan Lamb wherein you said,
I'm not objecting to reading it into the record. It's hearsay. If he wants to refresh his memory or ask me to have a conversation with her, that's fine. But reading it into the record in front of the jury is improper.
first of all, Your Honor, I'm not reading anything into the jury. I'm asking a question.
With that, then, I mean, Mr. Brown's point is well taken, but I did not think or see that you were reading. So with that, you may proceed.
Do you recall a text message conversation where you sent, actually a Snapchat conversation, where you sent a message to the effect of, you weren't going to jail if you and Jordan got back together because she was under 18 and her parents hated you?
I still do not recall that, no.
Okay. You would agree with me that those records exist, they speak for themselves?
Yes.
And if the record exists, that would be a more accurate recitation than your memory?
Yes.
Did you ever tell anybody you black out when you get angry?
Objections is asked and answered prior to the break.
Overruled.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Have you ever told anyone at any time on this planet that you black out when you get angry?
I don't recall.
Okay. If there's a record that says that, would you agree with me that that record is more accurate than your recollection?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay.
Always correct.
You may have answered this before, and if you do, I do apologize. Ulysses Felix, you knew him, right?
Yes.
Agents, when they were questioning you, asked you about a $200 cash withdrawal Mollie took out the night before she disappeared. Do you recall that?
Don't recall this.
It's relevant.
Overruled.
Do you recall that?
I do not recall that.
Do you recall Mollie purchasing a mattress within a couple days before she disappeared?
Overruled.
No, I don't.
You don't recall giving Mollie the information for the mattress guy in Grinnell a couple days before she disappeared?
No, I don't.
You don't recall Shane Slaymaker giving you the information for the mattress guy so Mollie could buy a mattress?
No, I do not.
And again, if there's records on that, those would be more accurate than your recollection.
Absolutely, yes.
Do you recall telling agents that you thought the $200 was for your golf tournament that Mollie would have put up the greens fees for?
I also do not recall that, no.
But you recall you were in Dubuque on that night, right?
Yes.
Clear as a bell.
Yes.
Were you drunk?
I don't recall that either, but I would imagine that I was drinking, yes, sir.
That's all I have.
Mr. Brown, questions of this witness?
I do. Let's talk about your job that Mr. Freeze just raised, okay?
Okay.
Where were you working?
Dubuque.
Okay, what company were you working for?
I was working for Jasper Construction.
And what job did you do for Jasper Construction?
We worked on roads and bridges, but I was a laborer.
Okay, full-time job?
Yes.
And did you work long days?
Yes.
Sometimes 12-hour days, correct?
Yes.
A lot of those jobs for Jasper Construction were away from Brooklyn, is that right?
Yes.
All right, this particular week that you were working for Jasper Construction, the week that would include Wednesday, July 18th of 2018, where was the job specifically?
In Dubuque.
Okay, and even more specifically than Dubuque, where at near Dubuque were you working?
I don't remember the name of the highway, but it was the bridge that goes over the Mississippi River to Wisconsin.
Okay, you left for that job on Monday, July 16th, is that right?
Yes.
And you would have driven there in your pickup truck?
Yes.
Is that the only vehicle that you utilized at that time?
Yes.
All right. Was it a truck that you were making payments on?
Yes, it was.
And that's why you were working, is to pay your bills, right, Mr. Jack?
Yes.
You tried college for a year and decided that wasn't for you,
Correct. Yes.
right? And so now you were working full-time for Jasper Construction as a road construction crew member.
Yes.
Nick Wilson was your supervisor?
Yes.
Is that somebody that you got along with?
Yeah, me and Nick got along great.
The crew that was working in Dubuque on the week that would include Wednesday, July 18th of 2018, there were 5 members of that crew plus Nick. Would that be true?
Yes.
And there was a second crew that had been assigned to work this same bridge area with you and your crew that week. Is that right?
Yes.
Would Nick Wilson have been the job foreman or crew foreman for that crew as well, or do you know?
No, that one was under a different supervisor.
Okay. So 2 different supervisors were with you in Dubuque, both that work for Jasper Construction. Is
Yes.
that right? as well as 2 separate crews that had been assigned to work in Dubuque for that particular week that included July 18th of 2018.
Yes.
Whenever you typically went on jobs like this, would you stay overnight in a motel?
Yes, we would.
And was this particular trip to Dubuque on July 18th of 2018, was it any different than any other trip?
No, it was not.
Did you see Mollie Tibbetts prior to leaving for the job on early Monday of July 16th of 2018?
Well, we slept in the same bed, so yeah, I got it.
She was staying with you and Blake and Allie at 622 West Des Moines in Brooklyn.
Yes.
You had, just as a refresher, you had 2 dogs that were there.
Yes.
And was she house sitting as well as taking care of the dogs while both you and Blake were away working?
Yes.
Blake was a construction worker also, is that right?
Correct. Yes.
He was working in Newton that week? Or do you even remember?
I don't remember where he was working now.
Allie, it was his fiance at the time, correct?
Yes.
Allie Houghton?
Houghton. Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry, mispronounced it, my bad. Allie Houghton?
Yes.
So whenever you left Brooklyn to go to your job working for Jasper on July 16th of 2018, you left Mollie.
Yes.
And that was the last time that you would have been in her presence prior to her death. Is that true?
Correct. Yes.
Drove your pickup to Dubuque?
Yes.
How long did it take you to get from Brooklyn to the job site at the river?
Over 2 hours.
Okay. And was it closer to maybe 2.5 hours to the job site?
Suppose so. Yes.
Okay. You didn't keep track of your time. Is that right?
I didn't keep track of the time. The supervisor, Nick Wilson, kept track of the time.
Okay. That's a good point. Nick Wilson would keep your hours that you worked. Is that correct?
Yes.
He would log them in. Is that right?
Yes.
There was no way for you to do that on your own.
No.
And was there another man that went with you on July 16th, 2018, going to Dubuque to work on this job site?
Yes.
And who was that?
Luis. I don't remember his last name.
Okay. Was Luis someone that worked with you at Jasper?
Yes.
Other than the job at Dubuque?
Yes.
And he needed a ride?
Yeah, he just needed a ride up.
And you gave it to him, right?
Yeah.
At any time, Mr. Jack, prior to Thursday afternoon, did you leave and go back to Brooklyn, Iowa?
No.
Were you ever in the presence of Mollie Tibbetts after early Monday morning, July 16th of 2018?
No.
Directing your attention to Wednesday, July 18 of 2018, I believe you previously testified that you had worked the whole day. Is that right?
Correct. Yes.
Would that be from 6 a.m. to about 6 p.m.?
Around about, yes.
Okay. And other people on the job site, including Nick Wilson, you would have been around them that entire day. Is that right?
Yes.
And you did have some communication with Mollie that you testified to earlier. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right. After the day ended, after the work day ended, did you go back to the motel?
Yes.
Did you shower up or clean up in any way?
Yes.
Is that, I'm assuming that working on a bridge that goes over the Mississippi is probably a dirty job. Is that right?
Yes. I don't have details on when I showered or what I did, but yeah, I showered.
I'm not asking details. I'm just asking if it happened.
Oh, okay. Yes.
All right. So whenever you got back to the motel that night, regardless of what you did, you were around other people on your crew. Is that right?
Yes.
At the hotel?
Yes.
And would that have included Nick Wilson, at least for part of the evening?
Yes.
On the evening of July 18th of 2018, did you drive back to Brooklyn, Iowa?
Was July 18th the Wednesday?
Wednesday, correct?
Oh, sorry. No, I did not.
All right. That was the day you worked a full day. Is that right?
Yes.
The next day, Thursday, July 19th of 2018, you had weather problems. Is that correct?
Yes.
So when you're on a road crew, weather problems stop the job. Is that right?
Yes.
It becomes too dangerous to work.
It just, becomes a big hassle to do anything.
It's just a big mess. Is that right? So you go back to the hotel that you were staying at. Is that correct?
Yes.
And you made some attempts to reach Mollie Tibbetts on July 19th of 2018. Is that right?
Yes.
And were those successful?
No.
You talked about one text message, I think, or maybe phone call. I can't remember. There was one of those. Is that correct?
Yes.
And did you make any attempts to reach her in any other way by calling her friends or calling other people that knew her?
Yes, I did.
All right. So like somebody like Emily Finner, do you know that person?
Yes.
That's a friend of Mollie's. Is that right?
Yes.
Did you talk to Emily Finner?
Yes.
You were trying to find Mollie. Is that right?
Yes.
Did you start to become worried?
Yes, I did.
And then did that cause you to want to come home?
Yes.
And did you express that worry to Nick Wilson or anyone else on the crew that you were working on?
Yes, I did.
So was it to Nick?
Yes.
Because that's the guy who's going to let you come home, right? Nick is going to be the one to let you leave early.
Yeah, Nick was the boss.
Okay, so you were supposed to work on Friday,
Yes.
right? And then you came home because you couldn't get a hold of Mollie,
Correct. Yeah.
and you got home sometime that night. Is that right?
Yes.
All right. Let's shift gears just a little bit. You've discussed a lot with Mr. Freeze about this relationship that you had with Jordan.
Yes.
Mollie was aware of the relationship. Is that correct?
Yes, she was.
And despite knowing about it, your relationship with her continued.
Yes.
And you were still making plans to propose marriage to her in August of 2018 in the Dominican Republic at your brother's
Yes, I
wedding.
was.
That wedding never happened, did it?
No, it did not.
All right, because Mollie had disappeared. Is that right?
Yes.
So it got canceled.
Yes, Blake and Ellie canceled their wedding.
Mr. Jack, the truck that you drove, you allowed police to search. Is that correct?
Yes, I did.
You took it to the Brooklyn Fire Department. Is that right?
Yes.
And you just handed it over to them?
Yes.
Did you stay there while they searched it?
No, I did not.
You left it there for a period of time?
Yes.
All right. Did you make any effort to try to do anything to the truck to alter it in any way?
No, I did not.
Did you ever try to prevent the officers from searching in any particular locations in the truck?
No, I did not.
Mollie had actually ridden in that truck before. Is that right?
Many times, yes.
She'd ridden in the cab of that truck with you,
Yes.
but you made no effort to conceal anything from the officers. Is that right?
No, I did not.
You were cooperative.
Yes.
Mr. Jack, just a few more questions. Do you own a black Malibu?
No, I do not.
Do you have access to a black Malibu?
No, I do not.
How about a black Malibu with a chromed mirror and chromed handles?
No, I do not.
How about a black Malibu with chrome mirror, chrome handles, and spoked wheels?
Objection has been answered.
Technically, that question has not been asked and answered, so the witness can go ahead and answer.
Can you repeat the question? I'm sorry.
Do you own or have access to a black Malibu that has chrome mirrors, chrome handles, or spoked wheels?
No, I do not.
Was your vehicle seen in the area where Mollie Tibbetts was running on July 18th of 2018, to your knowledge?
Objection calls for speculation.
To his knowledge, Judge.
Overruled then.
No.
Have you ever admitted that you were in Brooklyn, Iowa on July 18th of 2018, near where Mollie Tibbetts was observed running?
No, I have not.
Have you ever made any statements, Mr. Jack, placing you on 385th Avenue, east of Brooklyn, on July 18th of 2018 in the evening hours?
No, I have not.
You are now aware that Mollie Tibbetts was killed. Is that right?
Yes.
You are now aware that her body was found in a cornfield at 2478 460th Avenue. Is that correct?
Yes.
Did you take officers to that location to find Mollie Tibbetts?
No, I did not.
Did you place corn stalks on her body in order to conceal her from anyone that may be looking?
No, I did not.
Mr. Jack, did you have anything at all to do with the disappearance or murder of Mollie Tibbetts?
No.
That's all I have.
Mr. Freeze?
Mollie didn't know that you and Jordan had sex, did she?
Objections, calls for speculation.
Overruled, witness may answer if he knows.
Yes, she definitely did.
Do you recall telling agents when you were interviewed that Mollie didn't know that you and Jordan had sex?
No.
Do you recall telling agents that if Mollie would have found out that you and Jordan had sex, she definitely would have broken up with you?
No.
If there's a recording to that effect, that would be the best evidence of that comment?
Yes.
Nick Wilson's your supervisor, right?
Correct, yes.
Nick Wilson stays in the hotels with you, right?
Correct, yes.
And he's the one that you had to get permission from on Thursday to come back to Brooklyn, right?
Correct, yes.
Is he the same supervisor who was drunk and you had to take to the convenience store to buy cigarettes?
Objections is not relevant.
Sustained.
You testified the other day you had to take someone to the convenience store to get cigarettes before you left for Brooklyn, right?
I don't think I ever testified that.
Did you ever tell that to Matt George? Did
I'm sorry, who?
you ever tell that same information to Matt George?
Not that I can recall, no.
Was Nick Wilson drunk on that Thursday?
Not that I can recall.
Does he drink with you guys in the evening?
Yes.
Does he drink to the point of intoxication?
I mean, we all did.
And you'd agree with me that the statements you gave to officers regarding your activities and whereabouts on that July 18 and July 19 were pretty sketchy.
Objections is argumentative.
Overruled, but since the court doesn't understand the question, I'm going to ask that you rephrase it. How's that?
The details were few and far between as far as the specificity of your activities on the evenings of July 18 and July 17 to investigating agents, right?
I thought they were pretty clear.
You couldn't recall what night you got drunk and what night you stayed in the room, could you?
I don't recall even saying that.
And you're certain you worked on Monday the 16th?
Yes,
Positive.
yes,
Your work records will show that.
yes.
If your phone records indicate that you were home on the 16th, do you have any explanation for that?
No,
You sent Molly a text message at 8:18 on July 18, 2018 that said my phone data straight up won't work. Do you recall that?
yes.
And she didn't respond, did she?
No, she did not.
And that is something you recalled since the last time we were here in court?
I'm sorry.
That's something you recalled since the last time you testified?
I don't understand the question, I guess.
Did I ask you that question the other day, Mr. Jack?
Yes,
And you didn't recall it then?
don't know if I called it then.
So is Mr. Wilson going to come in here and tell us that you were in Dubuque? Is that the deal?
Objections, also speculation on behalf of this witness.
Sustained.
That's all I have.
Mr. Brown, anything else of this witness?
That's all. Thank you.
Thank you for being here, Mr. Jack. You're excused.
Can we first real quick?
Yes. Members of the jury, that completes our work for the day.